Chapter 71. Washington, D.C. White House. 2 hours after Black Emperor Shao became the president of the Soviet Union, Raven suddenly held a press conference. Ladies and gentlemen, just now, we received an unfortunate news. Soviet President Black Emperor Shao signed a presidential document for the full deployment of nuclear weapons. Gentlemen, I can tell you responsibly, nuclear war is about to begin. As the President of America, I will issue a presidential decree to announce that America's 8,000 nuclear warheads will enter the countdown to opening. Raven's presidential speech made people all over the world think that the President of America has gone crazy. Listen to what this president is saying. The Soviet Union opened the nuclear arsenal? This is simply nonsense. You know, the Soviet Union has nearly 8,000 nuclear warheads, once fully put into use. This is simply a devastating disaster for the whole world. Therefore, all countries in the world do not care about Raven's presidential speech. They think that Raven is using America's nuclear weapons to carry out nuclear deterrence against the Soviet Black Emperor Shao. However, what happened next? But it caused panic among the people all over the world. For hours after He Huang Shao became the president of the Soviet Union, all nuclear-armed countries detected that the nuclear warheads from the Soviet Union were being activated. Everyone realized it instantly. The President of America did not lie. The Soviet Union actually activated all its nuclear warheads. In the military bases of each country, some square-high Yuan Xuanwu detectives were densely packed with red dots. Everyone began to panic. In the following hour, the whole world sounded a nuclear explosion warning. Sharp nuclear explosion alarms were heard by all people in the world. At the same time, all nuclear-armed countries began to issue statements. In order to respond to the upcoming and possible nuclear June 4th strikes, the nuclear arsenals in these countries were fully activated. If observed from the military detection radar, the entire radar was densely packed with red dots. The total number of nuclear weapons of all countries in the world is more than 16,000. Such a huge number of nuclear bombs. It is enough to destroy the Earth where humans live many times. The world is once again on the brink of destruction. Humankind around the world is in a panic. The harsh warning of nuclear explosions makes them extremely frightened. Oh God, is the end of the world coming? Someone please save this world. All humans around the world can do at this moment is to pray. Pray that this is just a false alarm. However, the subsequent Red Square Declaration made them realize that this nuclear war is inevitable. At this moment, Red Square of the Soviet Union, He Huang Shao stood in front of the rostrum with high spirits, his hands open, as if embracing the world. Humanity has hidden more than 16,000 nuclear bombs. This is really ironic. I originally thought that the Soviet Union's nuclear bombs alone could not cover the world. Now, as long as the war starts, all the nuclear bombs will be launched together. By then, the entire human race will usher in a new world of evolution. Now, let us enjoy the last glory of mankind together. X-Men, don't you want to stop me? Don't you claim to be the embodiment of justice? Are you the superhero of the human world? As the creator of the new world, I, Black Emperor Shao, will give you 10 hours. X-Men, heroes of mankind, go and make the final struggle. I will let you know that I, Black Emperor Shao, am invincible. Behind Black Emperor Shao, a nuclear explosion countdown appeared. After 10 hours, the nuclear explosion will be unstoppable. At the same time, Black Emperor Shao also called out to the X-Men. Allow them to do everything they can to stop his plan in these 10 hours. With Black Emperor Zhao's declaration, all the panicked people focused their attention on the X-Men. At this time, they placed all their hopes on the X-Men. They longed for X-Men, just like Superman in the comics. Finally stopped Black Emperor Zhao's conspiracy to explode the world with nuclear explosions. After Black Emperor Shao delivered a speech on Red Square, in front of the White House in America, Brian, a member of the X-Men, also simultaneously issued the X-Men Declaration. Black Emperor Shao intends to baptize the whole world with a nuclear explosion. The nuclear crisis is coming. The world is in danger. At the moment of life and death for the world, we X-Men will continue to fight against the evil NC Black Emperor Shao for the sake of the world's human beings. We will uphold justice until death. We will use our own lives to fight for the dawn of hope for the world's human beings. We will spare no effort to stop Black Emperor Zhao's conspiracy. We will not stop until death. My heart and my actions are as clear as a mirror. Everything I do is just. May God be with the X-Men. May the world's human beings be with the X-Men. Brian's words are calm and powerful. The Homelander battle suit on his body makes him the dawn of hope for the world's human beings. The panicked human beings, after hearing the X-Men's declaration. These people began to cheer for the X-Men spontaneously. The peak produces hypocritical support. The dusk witnesses the devout believers. In the face of the world's nuclear crisis, the whole human race has only one way left. That is to hope that the superhero X-Men can win. People all over the world began to pray for the X-Men. At the same time, countless people began to become fans of the superhero X-Men. They firmly believed that the X-Men were the saviors of mankind. They were real superheroes. They would definitely be able to defeat the evil villain Black Emperor Zhao's conspiracy to destroy the world. Just when the world was panicking because of the nuclear explosion crisis. In the presidential office of the White House, Brian was leisurely drinking a glass of milk. The milk is a little cold. Holding the glass of milk, Brian took a sip and then frowned slightly. Because of the speech just now, the milk was a little cold. Brian was not used to drinking cold milk, so his eyes turned red. Then a laser beam shone into the milk bottle. Under Brian's precise control, the raw milk quickly became mild. Brian retracted his laser with satisfaction. He could have used the microwave heating ability he had just obtained to heat the milk. But he thought of the famous scene where Homelander used Cyclops to heat the milk bottle. So, Brian also heated the milk with Cyclops with a sense of malice. Brian, you are using Cyclops to heat milk? In the presidential office, Professor X couldn't stand it anymore. Especially when he saw Brian using Cyclops to heat milk. This made him lose his guard. In fact, it wasn't just Professor X who lost his guard. Cyclops Scott, a newcomer who had just joined the X-Men, was even more messy. While he was racking his brains on how to control the power of Cyclops, Brian, who also had the Cyclops ability, had already started using Cyclops to heat milk. The scene in front of him made Cyclops Scott doubt his life. It was the same Cyclops. It was the same laser. Why was the difference so big? Brian, lend me a light. Compared to the two people who were broken, Magneto was much calmer. He took out a Cuban cigar from his suit pocket, put it in his mouth, and said to Brian. Brian stretched out his hand, and a microwave instantly enveloped the Cuban cigar. Puff! Under Brian's microwave heating, the cigar was instantly ignited. Magneto took a puff of the cigar comfortably, and gave Brian a thumbs up with envy. Brian, you have been a little faster recently. After taking a puff of the cigar, Magneto said with envy. Maybe, Brian's ability is not what he adapted to. Beast Hank, who was in human form and wearing a white scientific coat, suddenly spoke, attracting the attention of all X-Men. Brian also looked at Beast Hank. Brian, maybe your ability is not survival of the fittest. Or in other words, the original ability was not survival of the fittest. Beast Hank looked at Brian seriously, and Brian's face was full of interest. He was not worried that Beast Hank had seen the secret of his Sera Template. He was even interested in Beast Hank's next explanation. Perhaps, from now on, he no longer needs to explain the source of ability. Hank, what do you mean? Professor X also looked at Beast Hank seriously, and he was also very curious about Brian's ability. Haven't you noticed? Brian gained new ability every time after contacting other mutants. Contacting Professor X with psychic ability, Brian awakening the psychic brain closure. Contacting the Rapids, he gained the tornado ability. Contacting the mutant with psychokinesis control, he gained psychokinesis control. I had doubts before. Maybe Brian's real ability is not adaptive evolution. Beast Hank paused when he said this. He looked at Brian with some complicated eyes, and in Brian's excited eyes, he expressed his guess. I think Brian's real ability is copying. He can unconsciously copy the ability of the mutant he comes into contact with. This also explains why Brian will have a new ability every time he encounters a new mutant. When they heard Beast Hank's guess, everyone nodded in agreement. They looked at Brian deeply. Maybe Beast Hank is right. Brian's real ability may really be copying. Only in this way can it perfectly explain Brian's frequent generation of new variant abilities. What about Brian's survival of the fittest? Magneto looked at Beast Hank and asked again. Maybe, when Brian was very young, he encountered a mutant with the ability of survival of the fittest and then unconsciously copied his ability. And because it was the first time he saw his own ability, Brian preconceived that his ability was survival of the fittest. The other variant abilities are all adapted by the survival of the fittest, zero after hearing Beast Hank's logically self-consistent ability. If Brian didn't know that he was awakening the Sera Template, he would have thought that his ability was copied. Faced with such a logically self-consistent reasoning that perfectly solved the problem of Brian's ability source. What else can Brian say? He definitely agrees with Beast Hank's point of view. Could it be that my ability is not survival of the fittest, but copying? No wonder every time I meet a new mutant, I always have a special feeling. Originally, I thought it was brought to me by the survival of the fittest. Now it seems that maybe it is because my copying ability perceives other abilities and spontaneously starts to copy. Brian did not admit that his ability is copying. But such ambiguous words make the X-Men agree with Beast Hank's point of view more and more. Brian's ability is not survival of the fittest, but copying. He can unconsciously copy the abilities of the surrounding mutants, then use them skillfully. Brian, your ability is actually copying. It's really unexpected. Professor X suddenly envied Brian. His ability is actually replication. This means that as long as he is given enough time, Brian will definitely be able to become a level 5 or even Omega level mutant. The replication ability is even more buggy than the survival of the fittest ability. Professor X, don't be so envious. I can't control my hidden garden system ability at all right now. Brian shrugged, seemingly comforting Professor X, but actually smiling very brightly. It seems that he is happy because he knows his true ability. In fact, Brian is happy that from now on, he no longer has to explain the source of his ability. He can openly use any ability he plundered, without worrying about the suspicion of the X-Men. Okay, let's talk about the nuclear explosion crisis in 10 hours. After chatting for a while, Professor X led the topic to how to prevent a global nuclear explosion. Following Professor X's voice, all the X-Men fell silent. They believe that they are level 3 or even level 4 mutants. But they had no idea how to deal with the next nuclear explosion crisis. Are you kidding? That's nearly 20,000 nuclear warheads. Once they are launched at the same time, let alone they are level 4 mutants. Even if there are a group of level 5 mutants, they are not enough to explode. Even Magneto, who usually boasts that ability and mutant are supreme, is rarely dejected at this moment. Let alone he is only a level 4 mutant now. Even after the enhancement of Apocalypse, the ability has been promoted to level 5 mutant, which can control the Earth's magnetic field. He can't face so many nuclear warheads. Professor X was also silent. Faced with the full launch of global nuclear weapons, Professor X's heart was almost desperate. He had no idea how to stop Black Emperor Shao from nuclear explosion all over the world. Seeing the X-Men's morale was depressed, Brian stood up. A confident smile appeared on his face. Professor X, you seem to have forgotten your ability. Brian's words made all the X-Men look at Brian. Even Professor X was confused. 0.0 He had no idea what Brian was talking about. Your mental power is enough to rival the world's nuclear weapons. Brian walked up to Professor X and said earnestly, Brian, what time is it now? Are you still in the mood to joke? Professor X frowned and said angrily. He said that his mental power is enough to rival the world's nuclear weapons. That's 20,000 nuclear warheads. What can he use to rival? Heads. However, looking at Professor X, who was self-deprecating, Brian couldn't help but look at Professor X with some pity. Professor X obviously has the most powerful mental power, but he is guarding a mountain of gold and eating steamed bread. It's simply a waste of natural resources. He can obviously make humans fear mutant as if they were gods in a moment. But he always sticks to his ridiculous principles. Even in the face of the humans' relentless pressure, even humans destroyed the future Xavier School for Geniuses, and more than once. Professor X did not react at all, but instead revoked his certificate again and again. You know, even the ancient mutant god Apocalypse coveted Professor X's ability. Professor X has the most powerful mental power, but his mind is so fragile that anyone can trample on it. Professor X, no matter how terrible nuclear weapons are, they are in the hands of humans. And you, my friend, as long as you control the launchers of global nuclear weapons, you control the global nuclear weapons. Yes, Brian is ready to follow Apocalypse. Let Professor X control the global nuclear weapons launchers through the brainwave enhancer. Then, throw all the human nuclear weapons into outer space. The reason for this is that human nuclear weapons are also a threat to Brian. Chapter 72. New York, Xavier Manor. All X-Men are standing in front of the X enhancement room. Even Raven has left the White House and returned to the X-Men. An X-scanning beam is projected from the center of the door of the X enhancement room, shining in front of Professor X's eyes. Verification passed. Welcome, Professor X. The metal door of the X enhancement room opened. Professor X took a deep breath and then walked in first. Brian and others followed closely. Before coming to the control console of the brainwave enhancer, Professor X looked back at Brian. Brian nodded at Professor X with a smile on his face, and then raised the video recorder in his hand. Professor X smiled bitterly, and then sorted out his mood, facing the camera head-on. Hello, people all over the world. I am Professor X, the leader of the X-Men. At the moment of life and death for mankind. As a leader, I should stand up. Use all my strength to save the world and resolve this nuclear explosion crisis. Justice will prevail. X-Men will prevail. Professor X spoke righteously and with a gentle face, just like the old Professor X in the future, wise and firm. His voice was full of the belief that he must win. At this moment, Professor X's eyes were full of confidence, as if he was the chosen one to save the world. Click. Brian turned off the camera. Professor X's expression suddenly relaxed. He looked at Brian with a complicated expression, unable to understand why Brian had to put on such a show. Brian, why are you always so keen on the superhero business? After a moment of silence, Professor X still asked his inner doubts. Because this is a superhero universe. Brian shrugged and answered casually. X-Men. Everyone looked at Brian in confusion, obviously not understanding what Brian meant by the superhero universe. Well, I just want to make mutants no longer like rats in the gutter. I want to prove with practical actions that mutants can also be heroes. They can also use their abilities openly. Enjoy the worship and admiration of humans. I want to tell those mutants who are living a miserable life that they can also live in the sun. Like heroes, live in the applause and praise of humans. Brian's words were full of emotion and resonated with all the X-Men. As X-Men, they have experienced the life of superheroes. That is why they know that what Brian said is true. As superheroes, they enjoy the applause and praise of humans in the sun. They are no longer mutants, but superheroes. They are the idols and beliefs of humans. Let mutants live in the sun, in the applause and praise. Professor X was deeply moved by Brian's words. When he just wanted to use his ability to protect some mutants with justice, Brian was ready to label the entire mutant group as superheroes. Professor X smiled at Brian with admiration. Looking at Professor X's mysterious smile, Cayenne accepted it calmly. He definitely didn't have such a great dream. In fact, the reason why he was so keen on the superhero business was to prepare for the establishment of Vought Company, only with the superhero label. In the future, when Vought Company launches superheroes, it will not be disgusted by humans. At the same time, this will also attract a large number of mutants to join Vought Company on their own. Become Brian's backup ability library. Okay, there are still 7 hours before the nuclear explosion. We have to hurry up. Professor X raised his hand and glanced at the Rolex in his left hand, then walked to the control console and gently picked up the helmet of the brain computer enhancement machine. Brian handed the camera to Raven. Raven filmed the whole process. This is first-hand information on saving the world. This is the opportunity for X-Men to completely ascend to the altar, to become a true superhero savior. He definitely won't let it go. Moreover, filming by Raven will not expose Raven's existence. I'm going to start. Professor X picked up the brainwave amplification helmet with a serious face, and then slowly placed it on his head. Buzz. With Professor X's action, the brainwave enhancement machine was instantly excited. The lights in the entire X enhancement room dimmed suddenly. Professor X's mind moved, and dense mental projections appeared in the X enhancement room. As Professor X's mental consciousness connected with the global human beings, countless noisy voices rang in everyone's ears. God, please save humanity. Pete Griffin, why are you pulling carrots with another woman? The world is about to end. I must do what I want to do. The madman Black Emperor Shao wants to destroy all mankind. For a moment, prayers, curses, and sounds of mental collapse swept in like a tsunami. The voices of billions of people around the world mixed with the sound of their hearts. Professor X frowned instantly. This was the first time he was so focused on connecting with the consciousness of the world's human beings. The sound of the heart, like a tsunami, filled his brain. It gave Professor X a splitting headache. And because Professor X focused too much on humans around the world were also dizzy and had a headache at this moment. Ding ding ding. In the X enhancement room, the brainwave enhancement machine issued a series of red alarms. Obviously, the mental alarm mechanism set by Beast Kiki was activated. Once Professor X continued to project his mental consciousness to all mankind, the entire human race would probably die instantly without the Black Emperor Zhao's nuclear explosion. Professor X really couldn't stand the impact of the sound of the heart in his mind on his consciousness. He took off the helmet on his head roughly. The brainwave enhancement machine was quickly turned off. The lights in the X enhancement room were turned on again. Professor X gasped heavily. No, I can't do it. Brian, I can't do it. I can't save the world. Professor X grabbed his hair with both hands in annoyance. He was affected by the despair and fear of the global human beings at this moment. Looking at Professor X, who was trembling uncontrollably, the X-Men members looked at each other. Then Brian walked in front of Professor X and gently placed his right hand on Professor X's shoulder. Persuasion ability activated. Brian's voice became very convincing. Professor X, calm down. Don't be affected by the collective emotions of mankind. Following Brian's words, Professor X, who was trapped in fear and despair, slowly calmed down. You are right, Brian. I should not be affected by the collective emotions of mankind. Professor X nodded in agreement. He used his mental power to delete all the fear and despair in his brain. Then he put on the helmet again. Boom. The voice of the human mind around the world turned into a tsunami and began to impact Professor X's brain again. Professor X put on the mask of pain again. Professor X, relax, relax. Brian stood beside Professor X, his voice low and powerful. Under Brian's persuasion ability, Professor X gradually began to relax. The painful expression on his face began to calm down. Professor X, who had calmed down, could still feel the panic and despair of all mankind. But he was able to quickly block these emotions from his mind. As Professor X's spiritual power gradually got used to blocking these spiritual sounds, the originally noisy spiritual sounds suddenly began to become less chaotic. Professor X slowly closed his eyes. He was originally a level 4 mind mutant. At this moment, under the spiritual pressure of the global human beings and Brian's guidance, his spiritual power began to grow rapidly again. A smile gradually appeared on Professor X's face. He, under the spiritual pressure of the global human beings, finally promoted to level 5 mind mutant. At this moment, Professor X found that he could split his mind into countless pieces. These fragments of spiritual consciousness directly shared the pressure of the global human collective emotions for Professor X. At the same time, these fragments of spiritual consciousness made Professor X seem to be split into countless pieces. He appeared in every corner of the world at the same time. This is a very magical spiritual perspective. He felt that he only needed to move his mind to synchronously control the brains of billions of people. Definitely, this is just an illusion caused by the promotion to level 5 mind mutant. After obtaining the split of mind consciousness, Professor X can indeed control many people simultaneously. But to control all mankind simultaneously, even the brainwave amplification machine can't do it. Professor X, who became a level 5 mind mutant, had a thought. His mind consciousness body quickly split into countless mind consciousness fragments, and then was transmitted to all parts of the world along the brain wave amplification machine. I saw it. I saw all the nuclear missile silos in the world. 20 minutes later, Professor X's mind consciousness fragments formed a mind network that only Professor X could sense. Professor X can let his mind consciousness be transmitted at will within the mind network. He can also use the mind network to issue instructions to his mind consciousness fragments in a moment. At this moment, his mind consciousness fragments have spread to nuclear launch bases around the world, and automatically entered the brains of tens of thousands of nuclear missile launch personnel who control the nuclear bomb buttons around the world. With just one thought from Professor X, he can instantly control nuclear missile launch personnel around the world. Brian, what should I do next? Professor X did not turn his head, but a spiritual consciousness had already appeared in front of Brian. Brian looked at the spiritual consciousness in front of him with interest. This was not a brain illusion or a mental illusion. Instead, Professor X truly projected his mind into reality. Not only Brian saw Professor X's spiritual consciousness, other X-Men members also saw Professor X's spiritual consciousness. Cool. Has the Professor's spiritual power increased again? There is no doubt that Professor X has become a level 5 mutant. Great. We X-Men also have a level 5 mutant. The other members of the X-Men were all excited. They were sincerely happy that Professor X became a level 5 mutant. As mutants, they knew very well what a level 5 mutant meant. Just look at Black Emperor Shao, and you will know. Level 5 mutant means powerful and unmatched. It also means that the X-Men finally have the capital to fight against Black Emperor Shao. Amid the cheers of the crowd, Brian was not surprised. He just looked at Professor X calmly. Then he reminded him, "Now, we just need to wait. Wait for humanity to fall into the most helpless and desperate moment." After becoming a level 5 mind mutant, Professor X was able to put forward some of his own opinions when facing Brian's persuasion ability. "Brian, maybe we should immediately launch these nuclear bombs into outer space." Brian looked deeply at Professor X, who refuted him, and then he said earnestly, "Professor X, you have to know that if we rashly resolve the nuclear explosion crisis, I'm afraid Black Emperor Shao will think of another way to implement his destruction plan." Brian's persuasion ability finally defeated Professor X. Professor X nodded again, agreed with Brian's statement. "You're right, Brian. We should wait a little longer." Professor X agreed with Brian. Then the X-Men fell into a long wait. While the X-Men were waiting for the right time, the outside world was already in a panic. As the nuclear crisis approached, humans began to fall into deep despair and helplessness. At this time, a video began to spread rapidly around the world. This video was Professor X's declaration recorded by Brian. "I am the leader of the X-Men, Professor X. As a leader, I will use all my strength to save the world. Save all mankind. May God be with me." 277 Professor X's words became the last straw for mankind around the world. All mankind around the world was looking forward to it, silently praying in their hearts that Professor X could successfully prevent this nuclear crisis that could destroy the world. Even Black Emperor Shao saw this video, but he didn't care about it. He believed that he had already stood on the scale of victory. His victory would be unstoppable, even if Professor X can control several nuclear silos through his mind power. But there are tens of thousands of nuclear silos in the world. Don't say that Professor X is only a level 4 mutant. Even a level 5 mutant cannot control tens of thousands of nuclear silos at the same time. In fact, what Black Emperor Shao said is right. Even if Professor X has become a level 5 mutant, his mind still covers only one city file size, and he can't control all nuclear silos at the same time. But Black Emperor Shao miscalculated one thing. That is, Professor X's brainwave enhancer. Black Emperor Shao didn't know that Professor X's brainwave enhancer could expand his brain waves to cover the whole world. At this moment, Black Emperor Shao was opening champagne to celebrate in advance. In front of the Red Square of the Soviet Union, all members of the Hellfire Club are here. Everyone's face is filled with the joy of victory. Now, the outcome is set. Just wait for 5 hours. Black Emperor Shao will personally give the order to launch all Soviet nuclear warheads to all nuclear countries in the world. At that time, in order to survive, these countries will also release nuclear bombs one after another. A nuclear war is inevitable. Let's toast to the new world ahead. Black Emperor Shao raised his glass and raised it above his head to celebrate. Cheers to the upcoming mutant world. Several members of the Hellfire Club raised their glasses together and drank them all. Only the Red Devil sat in the corner without saying a word. Azazo. Black Emperor Shao looked at the Red Devil, frowned slightly, and then walked in front of the Red Devil. Whistle. The Red Devil nodded to Black Emperor Shao. Azazo, what happened? Black Emperor Shao stared at the Red Devil, was silent for a moment, and then asked, "Shao, You are very strong and can withstand the impact of a nuclear bomb. But my body is very fragile. I am afraid I can't survive a nuclear explosion. The Red Devil said with a worried face. Hearing the words of the Red Devil, the other members of the Hellfire Club who were celebrating were also worried. Haha, I thought something happened. Azazo, your worry is unnecessary. I have prepared a nuclear shelter for you, right under the president's office. Black Emperor Shao smiled again, patted Red Devil's shoulder gently, and said calmly. Hearing Black Emperor Zhao's words, the members of Hellfire Club all breathed a sigh of relief. The celebration party continued. Chapter 73. Time passed by minute by minute. There were only 15 minutes left before the nuclear explosion time set by the Soviet Union's mutant president Black Emperor Shah. The end of the world is coming. The breathing of the people of the whole world seemed to have stopped. Despair, helplessness, and fear almost overwhelmed the human race. The reason why I say almost is because they still have a glimmer of hope. That is the superhero X-Men. Humans all over the world are praying silently at this moment. They are all looking forward to it. Looking forward to a miracle that is enough to be recorded in history. And at this moment, in front of the square of the White House, Raven, who has become the President of America again, is delivering a presidential speech. Ladies and gentlemen, we have been waiting for a miracle, an American miracle. Now, I can tell you responsibly that a miracle is about to come to America. X-Men have been fighting the evil Black Emperor Shao from the beginning to the end. They have not retreated and will never retreat. Justice will defeat evil. At this critical moment, I, the President of America, will always be in the White House. Believe me, friends, I will be with you and with all mankind. Raven's speech undoubtedly gave the people of America a shot in the arm. It also strengthened the confidence of all mankind. They waited quietly, waiting for the superhero to bring miracles to themselves. And just after Raven delivered the presidential speech, the drunk Black Emperor Shao also delivered a presidential speech on Red Square. People of the world, let us celebrate the advent of the new world together. I, Sebastian Shaw, will become the creator of the new world. Now, I will sign the presidential decree. Immediately release all Soviet nuclear warheads. I want to nuke the whole world. At this moment, Black Emperor Shah has completely made up his mind. He quickly signed the presidential decree and let Blood-Eye Kate order those Soviet military leaders to immediately activate the nuclear warheads. Under Blood-Eye Kate's ability, all Soviet military leaders issued orders to activate the nuclear warheads. For a time, thousands of nuclear missile launch bases in the Soviet Union quickly took action. Immediately aim the nuclear warheads at all nuclear-armed countries. Adjust the trajectory. Turn on the launch button safety device. Orders were quickly issued one after another. And with the Soviet Union's actions, all nuclear-armed countries in the world were mobilized. In a nuclear launch base in America, the American military leaders were staring at the dense red dots on the nuclear facility detection radar with a serious face, and cold sweat was pouring down their foreheads. General, the Soviet Union has signed a presidential decree. What should we do? A colonel asked. You ask me, who should I ask? General Humphrey, a senior military official, threw the military satellite phone in his hand to the ground in annoyance. Just now, he used the military satellite phone to talk to his superior. However, his superior only said that someone would give them an order. Then he hung up the phone. This made General Humphrey extremely confused and at a loss. He lit a cigarette in annoyance, and his hands were shaking. In the face of world destruction, no one can remain calm. Don't eat the sour radish. Waiting for the order, the Russian bear's nuclear bomb will fall on my head. General Humphrey threw away the cigarette, but in his hand, cursing and preparing to issue a nuclear bomb launch order directly. General Humphrey still understood the principle of striking first. Just when General Humphrey was about to go all out, disobey the order, and give the order privately, a gentle voice suddenly appeared in his mind. Be patient, General Humphrey. I am Professor X of the X-Men. I am also your direct superior. The moment the voice sounded, General Humphrey's irritable expression quickly disappeared. Instead, it was replaced by calmness and recognition. The moment Professor X's telepathic communication appeared, General Humphrey began to subconsciously obey Professor X's orders. In General Humphrey's subconscious mind, Professor X's orders must be obeyed. Professor X, please give your orders. General Humphrey saluted the air in front of him and said righteously, please set the ballistic trajectory of the nuclear warhead to outer space immediately. Professor X's voice sounded in General Humphrey's mind. Then General Humphrey quickly walked to the colonel and repeated Professor X's order. Set the ballistic trajectory of the nuclear warhead to outer space. General, in this way, when we face Soviet nuclear bombs, we will have no power to fight back. The colonel argued with great enthusiasm. Colonel, obey orders. General Humphrey said coldly. Yes, sir. The colonel saluted General Humphrey helplessly and then began to coordinate the staff of the nuclear launch base to set the landing point of the nuclear bomb in outer space. Such a scene did not only happen in this base. It was sent synchronously to tens of thousands of nuclear launch bases around the world. Under Professor X's powerful mental power, no one could disobey Professor X's orders. As for the Soviet nuclear bomb base, it was a different scene. In a nuclear launch base in Siberia, the Soviet Union, a Soviet officer suddenly had dull eyes, and then he went directly to the control panel and quickly changed the landing point of the nuclear bomb from New York, America, to outer space. Lieutenant Lekhanev, what are you doing? The abnormal behavior of this Soviet officer made the highest commander of the base furious. He pulled out his pistol and pointed it at Lieutenant Lekhanev's forehead. Sir, I'm doing the right thing. Lieutenant Lekhanev looked at the highest commander of the Soviet base calmly and said fearlessly, you are great, Lieutenant. But as a soldier, disobeying orders without reason, I need to shoot you to death. General Sergei looked at Lieutenant Lekhanev with great appreciation. This young man did what he had always wanted to do but didn't dare to do. But as a soldier, disobeying orders without reason is absolutely not allowed. Just when General Sergei was about to kill Lieutenant Lekhanev directly, Lieutenant Lekhanev suddenly pressed his right hand on his temple. A mental storm swept the entire base. General Sergei, who was the first to bear the brunt, fainted directly. Then came the staff of the entire base. A minute later, Lieutenant Lekhanev was the only one left in the entire base. And such a scene also happened in various nuclear launch bases in the Soviet Union. At this moment, New York, Xavier Manor, X Enhancement Room. Only Professor X, Brian and Magneto were left in the entire X Enhancement Room. Brian, Eric, I have controlled all the nuclear launch bases in the world. Professor X turned around and said to Brian and Magneto with a smile on his face. Well done, Professor X. You will be the savior of mankind. Brian patted Professor X's shoulder gently and said with a smile, that's right, Charles. After being a bystander for so long, you are finally useful. Magneto also nodded, but the words of praise made Professor X very uncomfortable. However, Professor X could not refute Magneto's words. In fact, as Magneto said, he obviously had super strong mental power during this period. But he was either restrained by White Queen Emma, or he was shielded by the mental shield. This made him very uncomfortable every time he fought. It was like his own spiritual power was banned. And now, Professor X finally got his revenge. The power of level 5 Mind Mutant was revealed at this moment. He, Professor X, was the most powerful mutant in the mind, the savior of mankind. How frustrated Professor X was before. He was so high-spirited now. After becoming a level 5 Mind Mutant, he became more adept at controlling his mind. The split of mind consciousness he obtained allowed him to split up to 20,000 fragments of mind consciousness. These fragments of mind consciousness were like Professor X's mind duplication. They were also like a cluster consciousness. These fragments of mind consciousness could be endowed with consciousness, memory, personality, etc. by Professor X. These fragments of mind consciousness also had Professor X's ability. They could act autonomously to help Professor X achieve his goals. Definitely, Professor X could also take back these fragments of mind consciousness with a single thought. The Lieutenant Lekhanev of the Soviet base is Professor X's spiritual consciousness fragment that occupied Lieutenant Lekhanev's consciousness, thus becoming an independent spiritual individual. In fact, it is not just Lieutenant Lekhanev. The Soviet Union has thousands of nuclear launch bases. There are dozens of Professor X. Professor X, Black Emperor Shao has started the countdown for the nuclear missile launch. Beast Hank walked in from outside, holding an advanced tablet in his hand. In this era, there are definitely no tablets. This is developed by Beast Hank using the top physics laboratory in America, which took more than 10 hours. It can be seen how amazing Beast Hank's invention ability is. Beast Hank came to Professor X and placed the tablet in front of the operating table of the brainwave enhancer. Then he operated on the tablet. Brian and the other two saw the figure of Black Emperor Shao appear on the screen. At this moment, in the presidential office of the Soviet Union, Black Emperor Shao sat drunkenly in the presidential chair, tapping the table unconsciously with his right hand. Behind him, there was a huge amount of screen. On the screen, the words of nuclear explosion countdown were clearly reflected. In front of Black Emperor Shao, there were all the members of the Hellfire Club: Red Devil, Ursa Major Angel Woman, Mutant Polly, Blood-Eye Kate, and a mutant Brian had never seen before. This mutant is a white man. He looks a little uneasy. He is obviously a new member who has just joined the Hellfire Club. These people are looking at the nuclear explosion countdown behind Black Emperor Shao with fanaticism, ready for battle. Red Devil, move our brothers and sisters to the nuclear shelter. Black Emperor Shao stopped tapping the table and ordered Red Devil. Okay, Shao. Red Devil nodded. And then all the Hellfire Club mutants in front of Black Emperor Shao held hands. Bang! These people disappeared in a red mist. They have been taken to the nuclear shelter under the president's office by Red Devil. It's almost time. The world should also usher in a nuclear explosion. He Huang Shao stood up, glanced at the countdown behind him, and then turned on a button in front of the president's desk. This button is definitely not a nuclear launch button. In fact, neither the Soviet Union nor America will hand over the nuclear launch button to politicians. After pressing this button, it will only issue an order to start the nuclear warhead. After the nuclear launch base receives the order, a special launcher will press the launch button. After the countdown returned to 0, He Huang Shao pressed the launch command button without hesitation. The launch command was instantly transmitted to various nuclear launch bases in the Soviet Union. At the same time, Brian, who had been paying attention to He Huang Zhao's actions, also said to Professor X, "Professor X, do it." Professor X quickly activated his mind consciousness duplication. When Professor X activated the mind consciousness duplication, Brian had already left the X enhancement room. At this moment, he came to the lawn of Xavier Manor, and with a little force on his feet, he flew straight into the sky. Boom! Brian's flight speed directly broke through the sound barrier. A huge amount of sonic booms swept across the entire Xavier Manor. In just a moment, he had already flown to an altitude of 10,000 meters. Hovering in the sky, Brian looked down. Under Brian's observation, whoosh whoosh. Under Brian's watch, nuclear warheads around the world broke away from the launch silo. Nearly 20,000 nuclear warheads were launched at the same time. The scene was spectacular. All over the world, the explosion sound produced by the nuclear warheads breaking away from the launch silo and then separating and accelerating at the tail can be heard. The nuclear warheads of the Soviet Union and America broke through the speed of sound first during the acceleration. A few minutes later, the nuclear warheads of other countries also accelerated to the speed of sound. Whoosh whoosh. Brian was suspended in the clouds. Nuclear warheads flew from bottom to top, passing by him, penetrating the clouds, and rapidly advancing toward outer space. It was not until this time that the drunken He Huang Shao realized something was wrong. What's going on? Why hasn't the nuclear bomb exploded yet? He Huang Shao looked up and took a look outside. When he saw that the nuclear warheads did not change their trajectory, but continued to fly above the clouds, He Huang Zhao's face changed drastically. He sobered up instantly. X-Men. He Huang Zhao's eyes were filled with endless anger, and he clenched his fists, trying to suppress his anger. Now even a fool should know that the nuclear bomb launch was abnormal. It must have been done by the X-Men. Looking at the nuclear warheads that were getting smaller and smaller, He Huang Shao felt a sense of powerlessness. The flying speed of the nuclear bomb was too fast. It was only a moment before it was about to fly out of the atmosphere. Boom! A burst of energy burst out from He Huang Zhao's body. The entire Soviet Red Square was instantly destroyed. Countless Soviet leaders were buried in the ruins. At this moment, on the ruins, Black Emperor Shao looked up at the nuclear bombs that were completely invisible. Black Emperor Shao suddenly laughed. Under extreme anger, people's emotions will become out of control. Black Emperor Shao saw that his plan to bomb the whole world failed. At this moment, he laughed wildly. Good, very good. X-Men, you are looking for death. Black Emperor Shao swore that if he didn't kill all the X-Men, he would be the world's strongest level 5 mutant. Just when Black Emperor Shao was helpless and furious, and laughed wildly. Brian in the sky, using the ability of flight, followed these nuclear warheads all the way, breaking through the troposphere and stratosphere of the Earth's atmosphere, arrived at the middle layer of the atmosphere. In this layer, the air is already very thin, and the temperature drops rapidly with the increase in altitude. Buzz. After arriving at the middle layer, Brian's body quickly began to adapt and evolve. His skin was instantly covered with a layer of golden film. This film effectively blocks the heat in Brian's body, keeping it at a constant temperature. At the same time, the golden film can absorb and filter strong ultraviolet rays, and can also absorb the surrounding water molecules, and then decompose them into oxygen to supply Brian's oxygen consumption. Boom. Being in the mesosphere, Brian did not feel any discomfort. The power of adaptive evolution was clearly revealed at this moment. When in the mesosphere, Brian stopped and did not continue to fly upward. He just quietly watched the dense nuclear bombs passing through the mesosphere, the thermosphere, and then entering the escape layer. This is already the edge of the Earth's atmosphere. As these nuclear bombs entered the escape layer, the dense nuclear bombs instantly lost gravity, just floating in the outer space of the Earth. Chapter 74. As the nuclear bomb was launched, the world fell into panic. Just when people all over the world thought that the end of the world was coming, a gentle voice appeared in their minds. Friends of the world, I am Professor X. Please don't panic. These nuclear bombs are flying to outer space. Under Professor X's global mental transmission, the people who were originally afraid of lies suddenly quieted down. They all walked out of their homes and stood outside looking at the sky. Just as Professor X said, the densely packed nuclear bombs in the sky showed no signs of falling, but flew straight to the sky. All countries in the world are closely observing the flight trajectory of the nuclear bomb. When they detected that the nuclear bomb had indeed flown into outer space, all heads of state began to hold press conferences at the same time, announcing that the nuclear bomb crisis was safely resolved with the help of superhero X-Men. The world was boiling. Everyone realized that the nuclear explosion crisis was resolved, and there is no doubt that the resolution of the nuclear explosion crisis was due to X-Men. X-Men, the savior of mankind. X-Men, a well-deserved superhero. For a time, people all over the world began to sing praises to X-Men. They regarded X-Men as the savior of mankind. Messiah, a well-deserved superhero. People all over the world worshipped X-Men. At this moment, X-Men completely ascended to the altar. They were no longer just America's superhero, but became the superhero of the world's human beings like Superman. 1 hour after the nuclear crisis was resolved, countless news about X-Men spread like snowflakes to the world. At the same time, in front of the White House Square, American President Rill was giving a speech. Ladies and gentlemen, with the help of the X-Men, we successfully shattered the Black Emperor Zhao's plot to nuke the entire world. We have achieved a historic victory. It turns out that the X-Men are the saviors of mankind. They saved the world. They saved billions of fellow human beings. They are the guardian angels of mankind. Raven praised the X-Men generously and even defined the X-Men as the guardian angels of mankind, the messenger of God. After a round of boasting, Rue smiled brightly. She continued, "Now, let us solemnly welcome the saviors of mankind, the superhero group of 7, the greatest mutant, the X-Men." As Raven spoke, in the sky, the X-Men slowly landed under the support of Brian's psychokinesis. And Brian once again landed perfectly in a superhero pose 977. The X-Men falling from the sky made the dense crowd in front of the White House scream. X-Men, saviors. The greatest mutant in the world. God, you saved the world and saved us. Cheers and screams came one after another, making all the X-Men smile. Some young girls even crossed the blockade. Then they rushed directly to the 3 giants of X-Men, Professor X, Magneto, and Brian. After the nuclear crisis was resolved, the popularity of X-Men reached its peak. People all over the world regard X-Men as a kind of belief. X-Men is justice. My heart and my actions are as clear as a mirror. Everything I do is justice. Professor X came to Raven and was infected by the fanatical atmosphere in front of him. He couldn't help but say, "Professor X, Savior." Professor X's words caused cheers from the crowd. Professor X looked at the crazy crowd and showed a gentle and kind smile on his face. "I'm glad that we, the X-Men, can save the world. This is our duty and obligation. As superheroes, we will do our best to protect humanity, free from evil and the powerful Black Emperor Shao. Let humans live in a peaceful, stable, and just world." Unconsciously, Professor X also began to regard himself as a superhero. His gentle and kind smile instantly gained a large number of fans. After he finished speaking, Brian also came to the podium. He just calmly looked at the somewhat fanatical crowd in front of him. Under his gaze, everyone quieted down. "Welcome to the new world created by X-Men. Nuclear-free era." Brian opened his arms and embraced the world. Boom. With just one sentence, Brian detonated the whole place. At this moment, the humans in front of the White House and the humans around the world who were watching this X-Men speech all realized one thing. That is, the world has ushered in a new era. Nuclear-free era. In this nuclear explosion crisis, the X-Men sent all the world's nuclear arsenals into outer space. From then on, the era of nuclear deterrence of superpowers has come to an end. All countries will usher in rapid development. The world is moving towards peace. Homelander, Homelander. People couldn't help but cheer enthusiastically. After experiencing a nuclear explosion crisis, human beings' fear of nuclear bombs, DOB, has reached its peak. At this moment, knowing that the world has officially entered the nuclear-free era, human beings are once again grateful to the X-Men. We will use the most powerful force to defeat the Black Emperor Shao and crush all his conspiracies. After Brian spoke, Magneto also began to speak. His words were powerful and convincing. Magneto also gained a group of fanatical fans. The entire press conference lasted for 2 hours. Even Cyclops Scott, who had just joined, gained a group of fans. After the press conference, the X-Men returned to Xavier Manor. "Let's hold a celebration party." Saving the world made Professor X a little proud. He took a few bottles of precious red wine from the 18th century from his wine cellar and started to hold a celebration party. For the savior of mankind, the embodiment of justice, and the messenger of God, the greatest mutant. Cheers. Professor X drank the red wine in the glass, his face full of high spirits. Even Magneto, at this moment, raised his glass and drank with a sunny smile on his face. The rest of Beast Hank, Shockwave Alex, Siren Sean Cassidy, and newcomer Cyclops Scott. They took the red wine bottle and began to drink crazily. Only Brian and Raven did not join the celebration party this time. Brian and Raven sat on the sofa in the living room, looking at Professor X and others with some pity. "When will Charles and the others grow up?" Raven said with some regret. "Raven, let them celebrate first. This may be their only celebration." Brian shrugged, then picked up Raven. "Now, we should celebrate too," Brian said with a smile on his face, and then the two of them left the living room and came to the bedroom. 4 hours later, Brian and Raven walked out of the bedroom. Both of them have very special physiques. After 4 hours of fighting, they are still full of energy. Coming to the living room again, Brian found that Beast Hank and the others were drunk. Only Professor X and Magneto remained sober. At this moment, the two were drinking red wine and playing chess in front of the sofa. The two met each other and had a good chat. At this moment, Professor X and Magneto regained their old feelings. The two looked at each other as if they were looking at their close friends. Brian came in front of the two and took a look at the chess on the table. Brian knew nothing about this kind of chess. So he just waved his hand, and the chess pieces and the chessboard were all thrown out of the window by him using psychokinesis. After doing all this, Brian raised his hand, and a glass of red wine on the garden automatically flew to his hand. "Brian, what are you doing? We have been playing this game for 2 hours." Professor X frowned, and it was obvious that he was still immersed in the game. Magneto, on the other hand, seemed very free and easy. Magneto just shrugged his shoulders after the chessboard was overturned and didn't care. "Okay, Mr. Savior. The celebration party is over. Now, we should also discuss how to deal with the angry world's strongest mutant." Brian drank the red wine leisurely, and then said calmly, after hearing Brian's reminder. Professor X, who was a little dissatisfied just now, changed his face instantly. Magneto, who was smiling just now, also turned cold instantly. Yes, they suddenly realized that they were a little too proud. Just because they destroyed Black Emperor Zhao's plan to nuke the whole world, they thought they had defeated Black Emperor Zhao. Little did they know that their real opponent was never the nuclear crisis, but Black Emperor Zhao, the most powerful mutant in the world, no one else. Professor X rubbed his dizzy head and smiled bitterly. We got a little too proud of ourselves. The excitement of becoming the savior of mankind made me a little complacent. I actually forgot the existence of Black Emperor Zhao. Professor X was a little annoyed. Magneto was also very annoyed, and even hated himself a little. He was a little obsessed with the aura of a superhero, to the point that he even forgot the blood feud between himself and Black Emperor Zhao. Magneto wanted to give himself a coin directly on his forehead. Then Professor X and Magneto all looked at Brian. Brian, you should be the leader of the X-Men. Among the entire X-Men, only Brian remained awake throughout the whole process. Cursed Professor X, and the two felt ashamed. Even Professor X wanted to give the position of leader to Brian. Brian definitely doesn't want to be the leader of the X-Men. What he wants to do now is to kill Black Emperor Zhao and get his mutant ability. So, Brian just patted Professor X's shoulder with encouragement. Professor X, don't belittle yourself. I just think more than you. You are still a qualified leader of the X-Men. Brian's encouragement was very useful to Professor X. Okay, let's talk about how to deal with Black Emperor Zhao. Brian didn't intend to waste time. He said straight to the point. After hearing Brian's words, Professor X and Magneto subconsciously looked at Brian. Why are you looking at me? I don't know what Black Emperor Zhao is going to do. Darwin did not predict this situation. Brian was telling the truth. The first battle of the current mutant has obviously deviated from the plot. How could he know what Black Emperor Zhao was going to do? After hearing Brian's words, Professor X and Magneto sighed helplessly. It seems that they can't rely on Kane's prediction. They can only think of a way themselves. Let's go. Let's go to the X enhancement room. Without Brian's reminder, Professor X, who had been thinking hard to no avail, stood up and took Brian and others to the X enhancement room. Now Professor X is increasingly dependent on the brainwave enhancer. The feeling of connecting the consciousness of the whole world makes Professor X very excited. In the X enhancement room, Professor X put on the helmet skillfully and then began to screen the news about Black Emperor Zhao. Now Professor X is already a veritable level 5 psychic mutant. So, after putting on the helmet, he located Black Emperor Eyebrow almost instantly. Red Square of the Soviet Union. He Huang Xiao stood in an open space with a gloomy face. Around him were fully armed Soviet troops. With the help of the eyes of these soldiers, Brian and others clearly saw the situation of He Huang Xiao. Mr. President, are you sure you want to do this? The Soviet presidential assistant walked to He Huang Xiao with some fear and asked tremblingly, "You talk too much nonsense." He Huang Xiao grabbed the presidential assistant with his right hand, and then a burst of energy instantly submerged the presidential assistant. Boom! An explosion sounded. The presidential assistant was directly blown into a bloody mess. He Huang Xiao threw away the body in his hand, and then looked at the army surrounding him with an extremely gloomy look. "Now attack me." He Huang Xiao's voice carried an unquestionable order. The Soviet soldiers in the Red Square looked at each other. They didn't dare to disobey the order of the mutant president. Fire. A Soviet general gritted his teeth and directly issued an order to fire. With the order of this Soviet general, the Soviet army began to show what a steel torrent is. Countless bullets, RPGs, tank mortars, missiles, and other modern firepower poured down crazily. They rushed towards He Huang Xiao in an overwhelming manner. Facing the saturation attack of the Soviet army, He Huang Xiao still stood upright in the same place. Boom! A huge amount of mushroom clouds submerged He Huang Xiao. The fire explosion formed by the fire coverage had just risen to 3 meters high and began to collapse instantly. At this moment, He Huang Xiao's body seemed to be shaking. Countless energies were absorbed into his body. He opened his hands, and the 10 fingers of both hands were shaking, as if he had 2 more main hands. The violent energy was quickly compressed into his palms. The original mushroom cloud disappeared. The flames of the explosion also disappeared in an instant. The first round of attack by the Soviet army was smokeless. All the energy was absorbed into He Huangxiao's body. Continue. He Huangxiao shook his head and looked at the army on the opposite side. The Soviet soldiers were frightened to death when they saw that He Huangxiao was unscathed. However, under the pressure of He Huangxiao's powerful force, no one dared to disobey He Huangxiao's orders. The fire coverage began again. He Huangxiao continued to energy absorb. In the following time, the Soviet military began to frantically transport heavy firepower weapons to the Red Square. And He Huangxiao accepted everyone who came. At this moment, he was already covered with a layer of golden energy coat. Between his gestures, the surrounding ground cracked inch by inch. At the same time, his eyes also glowed with golden energy. Now He Huangxiao has a huge amount of energy in his body. Like the god of war in Greek mythology, he is full of momentum. Holy shit, He Huangxiao is crazy. He is energy absorbing crazily. Seeing that He Huangxiao was still absorbing energy, Professor X's face changed drastically. His spiritual consciousness had sunk into the eyes of a Soviet soldier. Observing He Huangxiao closely, the sense of oppression formed by the energy made him terrified. Even the air seemed to be overwhelmed at this moment, and ripples appeared. X-Men. After absorbing another round of energy, Black Emperor Shao suddenly spoke. The energy contained in his body made his voice easily spread all over the world. He did not have the ability of sound waves, but just adding energy to the sound was enough to make Black Emperor Zhao's voice spread all over the world. At this moment, all humans heard Black Emperor Zhao's deafening voice, which contained endless anger. You destroyed my dream. You will pay for it. Chapter 75. Soviet Union, Moscow Red Square. Countless armored vehicles are transporting various types of missiles back and forth like ants moving house. In the center of a Soviet army, Black Emperor Shao is covered in a golden energy coat and is sending his own voice to the world. X-Men, don't you call yourself the savior and the superhero of mankind? In this case, come and stop me. This time, I will go to New York in person. I will let you X-Men feel the wrath of the world's strongest mutant. I will let you, a bunch of jokers, traitors of mutant, feel the shame. What is despair? What is death? X-Men, your doomsday is here. Black Emperor Zhao's voice is like rolling thunder, spreading all over the world. His voice suppressed anger and madness. The X-Men destroyed his plan to instantly explode the world with nuclear explosions. Let his new world of mutant be burned. This made Black Emperor Shao want to tear the X-Men into pieces. With Black Emperor Zhao's declaration of war, the world, which had just been peaceful for a few hours, was in panic again. Especially the citizens in New York. They fell into endless panic. At this moment, in the enhanced room of Xavier Manor, Professor X, Magneto, and Brian also heard the war declaration of Black Emperor Shao. Except Brian. Professor X and Magneto's faces changed drastically. F***K. Black Emperor Shao wants to turn himself into a nuclear bomb. He wants to blow up New York. As Magneto, who has followed Black Emperor Shao since childhood, he knew Black Emperor Zhao's intention in an instant. Black Emperor Shao wants to turn himself into a nuclear bomb. Then in New York, detonate the energy in his body like a nuclear bomb. With absolute power, New York should be pacified. Professor X took a breath. He was shocked by Black Emperor Zhao's madness. Black Emperor Shao actually wanted to turn himself into a human-shaped, self-propelled nuclear bomb, then blow up the entire New York. To vent his anger. Black Emperor Shao, he is crazy. Professor X spoke with difficulty. He was really scared by Black Emperor Shao. Even Brian called him a good guy. What if there is no nuclear bomb? As long as Black Emperor Shao absorbs enough energy, he is a nuclear bomb. Moreover, it is a reusable nuclear bomb. His variant ability allows him to continue energy absorbing after detonating the energy in his body and forming a nuclear explosion. Continue nuclear explosion. Infinite loop. Anyway, his ability makes him completely immune to the damage of nuclear explosion. The world's strongest mutant showed enough power to crush the world at this moment. Now, how can we stop Black Emperor Shao? Professor X and Magneto looked at each other. The joy of becoming the savior just now disappeared. At this moment, they only had fear in their hearts. In fact, the shock and pressure brought to them by Black Emperor Shao were too great. That's why they had no idea how to stop Black Emperor Shao. Brian, do you have a way? Professor X set his eyes on Brian, who always looked calm, expecting Brian to come up with a way to fight Black Emperor Shao. I'm sorry, Professor X, I don't have a way to fight against Black Emperor Shao. Brian spread his hands and told the truth. At this time, Black Emperor Shao is almost invincible. The ability to absorb any form of energy makes Black Emperor Shao immune to all attacks except mental power. Even Brian can only fight Black Emperor Shao on equal terms. He can't kill Black Emperor Shao. Black Emperor Shao can't kill him either. It can be said that the only two hard-to-kill mutants in the world are Brian and Black Emperor Shao. This is why Brian tried so hard to join the X-Men. Because he really can't beat Black Emperor Shao. He can only use the power of Professor X and Magneto to contain Black Emperor Shao. Then Brian is looking for an opportunity to take off his mental protection helmet unexpectedly. Let Professor X use mental power to temporarily control Black Emperor Shao. Only in this way can Brian kill Black Emperor Shao. Facing the strongest mutant in the world, we only have two choices. The first choice is to flee New York, hide our identities, and linger on. The second choice is to confront Black Emperor Shao head-on, fight to the death. Maybe we still have a glimmer of hope to win. Brian's calm words made Professor X and the others look resolute. Advertisement, they will definitely not escape. Neither Professor X nor Magneto are people who escape at the last minute. Then, they only have one way to go. That is to fight head-on. This is our first battle in the true sense of the X-Men. It is also likely to be the last stop. Professor X's tone was extremely heavy. Strictly speaking, this was the first real battle of the X-Men. The previous battles could only be regarded as minor fights. Then Brian and the other two began to discuss how to fight against Black Emperor Shao. In order to prevent the X-Men from having too many constraints in this battle, the first thing is to evacuate the people of New York. Professor X was very concerned about this matter. In order to evacuate the people as quickly as possible, Professor X directly used the brainwave enhancer. He put on a helmet. The mind instantly connected with all the people in New York. Then Professor X began to broadcast his mind to all the people in New York. People of New York City, I am Professor X, the leader of the X-Men. I have an unfortunate news to tell you. Black Emperor Shao is going to bomb New York. For everyone's safety, please evacuate New York as quickly as possible. All the people in New York City received Professor X's mind broadcast. When they learned that Black Emperor Shao was trying to transform into a human-shaped nuclear bomb and explode New York, the citizens of New York became more panicked. Everyone began to flee New York. This made the streets of New York chaotic. Buzz, buzz, buzz. Just when these people were like ants on a hot pot, anxiously turning around, military helicopters quickly came in the sky. The New York Army began to guide these citizens to escape. At the same time, in the White House President's office, Raven began to deliver a presidential speech. Please evacuate New York citizens in an orderly manner. Don't panic. You must believe that the war police are with you. With New York, they will fight to the last moment until they defeat Black Emperor Shao. With Raven's presidential speech, the American government began to operate. The evacuation of New York citizens began to become orderly. However, New York City has a population of millions. It would take at least 10 hours to evacuate all of them. Black Emperor Shao, obviously, will not wait until then. So, in order to buy time for New York citizens, Professor X could only use the brainwave enhancer again to control the Soviet army. At this moment, in front of the Soviet Red Square, explosions came one after another. He Huang Shao opened his hands and let the overwhelming missiles hit him. The golden energy coat on his body became more and more dense. A pair of eyes were completely covered by the golden energy. He Huang Zhao's hands continued to emit golden energy, causing the air around him to fluctuate violently. Continue. This energy is far from enough. He Huang Zhao's eyes were shining with gold, and his voice spread to the entire Soviet army. Swish. Just when He Huang Shao was looking forward to the next round of firepower coverage, the Soviet army in front of him suddenly stopped attacking. All the Soviet soldiers stopped in place in an instant. Mind control. Looking at all the Soviet soldiers who were in a state of stillness, He Huang Shao instantly realized that these people were controlled by the power of the mind. And there is only one mind mutant who has the power of the mind and can control tens of thousands of Soviet soldiers at the same time. Professor X. He Huangshao gritted his teeth and looked at the stationary soldiers. He knew that these Soviet soldiers were controlled by Professor X. He Huangshao, don't make the same mistake over and over again. Your plan is doomed to fail. Suddenly, the stationary soldiers threw their weapons on the ground in unison and then turned to He Huangshao at the same time, giving him earnest advice. Advertisement. Shut up, you mutant traitor, shame. The world is changing. The future will be an era of genetic evolution. During World War II, there were only single-digit mutants. But after only a dozen years, the number of mutants has increased to tens of thousands. This is a natural evolution. As time goes by, the birth of mutants will show a blowout trend. We mutants are the masters of this world. We are the product of natural evolution. And humans are just a backward race destined to be eliminated by mutants. Professor X was silent. He found that what Black Emperor Shao said was right. As a spiritual mutant, he could also feel it. In recent times, more and more mutants have begun to awaken. This is a natural evolution process. Mutants with ability may really replace humans in the future. Black Emperor Shao, maybe you are right, but I still have to stop you. Professor X was silent for a moment, then said calmly. He admitted that He Huangshao might be right. Zero asked for flowers. But Professor X's belief made him unable to agree with everything He Huangshao did. In Professor X's view, the birth of mutant was based on the huge human group. Once humans disappeared, mutant would not be far from extinction. That is why, whether now or in the future, Professor X was always very tolerant towards humans. He Huangshao was almost amused by Professor X. Stop me? How are you going to stop me? He Huangshao was extremely confident. He believed that no one in the world could be his opponent except Brian. Professor X did not answer He Huangshao. He began to concentrate on controlling the Soviet soldiers. Under the gaze of He Huangshao, the Soviet soldiers quickly began to retreat. Even the armored vehicles that transported missiles for He Huangshao began to turn around. The best way to stop He Huangshao is to not give He Huangshao any energy-absorbing opportunity. Seeing the Soviet soldiers gradually retreating, Black Emperor Zhao's face became extremely gloomy. He has not absorbed enough energy yet. Professor X used a trick to cut off the fire from under his feet. This made him unable to suppress his anger. Boom! He Huangshao stomped his feet on the ground. The ground under his feet was instantly bombed by missiles, and a huge amount of missile craters appeared. And He Huangzhao's body jumped directly to a height of tens of meters. He could not only release the energy in his body. At the same time, he could also use the energy in his body to strengthen his physical fitness. Oh boom! He Huangshao jumped down, and when his feet touched the ground, the falling energy instantly spread. Dozens of Soviet soldiers were blown away by this energy. He Huangzhao's whole body was shining with golden light. A huge amount of energy poured out of his body. The energy enveloped the entire army in a pulse. Then the energy exploded. In the explosion, a Soviet army of more than 10,000 people turned into nothingness. After the explosion, the energy generated by the explosion was absorbed into He Huangzhao's body again. There was not even a trace of energy loss. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Just after Black Emperor Shao easily killed an entire Soviet army, missiles whizzed past his head. Then they disappeared from Black Emperor Zhao's sight. Black Emperor Shao was silent for a moment. His face became extremely gloomy. Don't eat the sour radish. At this moment, the world's strongest mutant was broken by Professor X. Obviously, just when Black Emperor Shao destroyed the entire Soviet army like cutting melons and vegetables. Professor X also threw all the missiles in the Soviet Union through the brainwave enhancer. As for the direction, Professor X followed Brian's advice and sent another wave of missiles to Tokyo, Japan. Now, the Soviet Union no longer has heavy firepower weapons that can make Black Emperor Shao energy absorbing. His dream of becoming a humanoid nuclear bomb once again died. Good, very good. He Huangshao clenched his fists, and the golden energy layer on his body gradually disappeared. Although He Huangshao still has a huge amount of energy in his body, his energy is only 1/3 of a nuclear warhead. Although this is already very huge, it cannot meet He Huangzhao's requirement to nuke New York. Red Devil, let's go to Cuba. He Huangshao took a deep breath and calmed himself down. He whistled. The Red Devil suddenly appeared in front of He Huangshao. He Huangshao gave the Red Devil an order in a cold tone. In Cuba, there is a nuclear-powered submarine of He Huangshao. He is going to directly absorb the energy of the nuclear-powered submarine. Bang! The Red Devil and He Huangshao disappeared in the Soviet Red Square. He Huangshao went to Cuba. Professor X took off his helmet helplessly. He can control all military bases in the world, but he cannot control an empty nuclear-powered submarine. Perhaps it is for this reason that Black Emperor Shao did not choose to go to other military bases, but returned to his nuclear-powered submarine docked in Cuba. The plot went around and got back on track again. Let's go to Cuba. Brian stood up and walked out of the X enhancement room first. Now, it's time for the final battle with Black Emperor Shao. And the first battlefield of the decisive battle is the unnamed island in the Cuban waters in the plot. Now, the first battle of Mutant officially begins. Chapter 76. Cuban Waters. Inside a nuclear-powered submarine on the seabed, a cloud of red mist suddenly appeared. Then the Red Devil appeared here with the Black Emperor Shao. Red Devil, the X-Men should be here soon. Let the members of Hellfire Club prepare for the battle. Hold the X-Men and buy me some time. As He Huangshao said, he walked to the nuclear power room and opened the door. Inside the nuclear power room is the most advanced nuclear reactor in the Soviet Union. This is also He Huangshao's goal. As long as he absorbs this nuclear reactor, he can truly transform into a humanoid self-propelled nuclear bomb. Then he will fulfill his promise. Nuclear explosion in New York. Then he will use up the energy absorption of the nuclear explosion in New York and continue to carry out nuclear explosions in other cities. With his ability, he can carry out unlimited nuclear explosions. However, the energy of the nuclear reactor needs to be actively absorbed by He Huangshao. According to He Huangshao's calculations, even with his ability, it will take several hours to use up the energy absorption of the nuclear reactor. And He Huangshao knows very well. The X-Men will definitely come to stop him. So, he needs to gather the Hellfire Club, Mutant, to buy time for him. After giving the order to Red Devil, Black Emperor Shao entered the nuclear power room. The heavy door fell quickly, completely isolating the sound outside. Black Emperor Shao walked to the front of the nuclear reactor, then stretched out his hands and grabbed the two tungsten rods that were stretched out. Boom! The huge energy immediately poured into Black Emperor Zhao's body through the tungsten rods. With the influx of energy, Black Emperor Zhao's body began to vibrate violently. His body seemed to be split into two. There were many phantoms in his hands. Black Emperor Zhao's ability was fully released. Bang! Inside the nuclear-powered submarine, Red Devil took a deep look at the direction of the nuclear power room, then turned into a puff of red mist and disappeared. A few seconds later, 093, a group of reds spread in the submarine room. Then, the mutants of the Hellfire Club were brought to the submarine room by the Red Devil. Red Devil, what happened? The current White Queen of the Hellfire Club Angel was having fun with a handsome Soviet officer. At the critical moment, she was violently pulled over by the Red Devil, which made Angel very angry. However, after seeing all the members of the Hellfire Club gathered, Angel suppressed her anger, casually pulled a tablecloth and draped it over her body, and then asked, "Members of the Hellfire Club, now is the time for a decisive battle. According to the order of the Black Emperor Shao, you must delay the X-Men for 6 hours at all costs." After saying this, the Red Devil teleported away. Only the members of the Hellfire Club looked at each other. Angel's face was solemn, and then a hint of excitement appeared on her face. Is it finally time to fight the X-Men? I can't wait. As the current White Queen, Angel was despised by other members of the Hellfire Club because of her ability, especially the newly joined Blood-Eye Kate, who was even more dismissive of Angel. This made Angel very eager to prove herself. That's why Angel was so excited after hearing Red Devil say Hellfire Club was going to have a showdown with X-Men. In her opinion, this was a stage to prove her ability. She wanted to let everyone see her power. Compared to Angel's excitement, the other Hellfire Club members had different expressions. Ursa Major was silent, just like the torrent before. The tall and majestic body stands like an iron tower, but the eyes look listless. The ability of Ursa Major is to transform into a Siberian brown bear. But at the same time, he is also affected by the transformation into a brown bear, and his reaction is relatively slow. Once he encounters a comfortable environment, he will involuntarily enter a state of hibernation. When the Red Devil found him, he was sleeping soundly in his home. Mutant Polly, who is old and looks like he is about to die. He is closing his eyes to rest. The wrinkles on Polly's face are crisscrossed, and his face looks like a piece of dry bark. However, his eyes are extremely bright. In the pupils of his eyes, you can see a series of golden lights flashing continuously. Mutant Polly's ability is mental protection. He can release a mental shield to protect other people's minds from the invasion of mental mutants. At the same time, in addition to protecting against the invasion of mental mutants, it can also protect Polly's mind, isolate the body and mind, and protect his mind from the invasion of time. Although Polly's body is old and frail, but his mind is still young. Even under the mental protection, even if Polly's body is destroyed, his mind can still survive alone. Although the ability of mental protection does not have much attack power, but the life-saving ability is very powerful. "Mr. Polly, are you still alive?" Blood-Eye Kate came to Polly in a sexy outfit and patted Polly's shoulder gently. Polly ignored Blood-Eye Kate. Mind protection makes him immune to Blood-Eye Kate's ability. Blood-Eye Kate was asking for trouble, but she was not annoyed. She glanced at Polly, and then came to Ursa Major. "Ursa Major, I need your protection." Blood-Eye Kate knew very well that her ability was very bad in combat. At the moment of the decisive battle with X-Men, she needed to find a bodyguard for herself. Originally, Blood-Eye Kate was going to directly control all the people in Hellfire Club. However, because of Polly's mental protection, her ability was directly blocked. That's why Blood-Eye Kate wanted Polly to die immediately. This way, she could control the Hellfire Club and become the third White Queen of the Hellfire Club. Seeing that her ability was restrained, Blood-Eye Kate could only use the beauty trap. Get lost, however, just when Blood-Eye Kate was flirting with Ursa Major. Ursa Major suddenly roared at Blood-Eye Kate. Obviously, Blood-Eye Kate knew nothing about the habits of Siberian brown bears. The current season is not suitable for JP of animals. Blood-Eye Kate's face darkened, and she looked at Angel's gloating expression, and she became even more furious. A5. Blood-Eye Kate turned her head and looked at the newcomer who had just joined, Mutant Claude. Claude was a young white man, with a face full of uneasiness and a panicked look. He constantly looked at the nuclear-powered submarine. As a newcomer to the Hellfire Club, Claude was always panicking. He had just joined the Hellfire Club and had not yet enjoyed the privileges of being a member of the Hellfire Club. He was forced to participate in the final battle with the X-Men. And his ability, although very powerful, but the weakness is also very obvious. Claude's ability is to create earthquakes through his fists. If he fully releases his ability, he can even set off a magnitude 8 earthquake. But the disadvantages are also very obvious. He can only release his ability through his fists. His fists must touch the ground. Moreover, his body is as fragile as that of an ordinary person. This makes him need to consider not being killed by his ability when creating an earthquake. Definitely. So far, the members of the Hellfire Club do not know the weakness of his ability. It can be said that Claude's ability is very strong, but also very weak. Moreover, in a nuclear submarine, his ability cannot be released at all. This is the source of his panic. If the battlefield is in a nuclear submarine or in the sea, Claude is ruined. "Claude, you will protect me, right?" Bloody-eyed Kate didn't notice the panic in Claude's eyes. She posed in a pose that she thought was sexy and whispered to Claude. Claude, who had never seen such a scene, was fascinated by Bloody-eyed Kate. He nodded involuntarily. Bloody-eyed Kate smiled and kissed Claude directly. In the eyes of Bloody-eyed Kate, Claude was very powerful. Being able to create an earthquake, Claude firmly sat in the second place on the Hellfire Club's combat power list. Looking at Bloody-eyed Kate, who came to the door automatically, Claude panicked even more. He was afraid that if his weakness was known, he would be killed by Bloody-eyed Kate. So, in order to avoid such a situation, Claude could only pretend to be calm. And just as the Hellfire Club was waiting for the decisive battle to come, in the Xavier manner of the X-Men, a supersonic fighter took off quickly. In the cabin of the fighter, Professor X and Magneto looked at the people lying on the ground with embarrassed faces. X-Men members. The two looked at each other and smiled helplessly. It was all because they were too complacent. After resolving the nuclear crisis, a celebration party was held. So much so that except for the 3 X-Men, the other X-Men members were drunk and unconscious. What was even more embarrassing was that this celebration party was proposed by Professor X. "Charles, these people are in your hands." Magneto stood up, patted Professor X on the shoulder, and then went directly to the co-pilot seat in the cockpit. Looking at Magneto's attitude, Professor X's eyes twitched slightly. But who made him propose the celebration banquet? Professor X could only use his mind power to wake up the hangover brain consciousness of Beast Hank and others one by one. In the cockpit, Brian was lying leisurely on the cockpit, controlling the supersonic fighter through psychokinesis. Magneto sat in the cockpit. His eyes were solemn and expectant. "Brian, do you really have the calendar to lose the Black Emperor eyebrow?" Magneto asked again. In fact, this is not the first time Magneto asked Brian. The strength of the Black Emperor brought great pressure to Magneto and Professor X. Although they chose to confront the Black Emperor head-on, but only they knew that they had little confidence in winning. This decisive battle was just a forced battle. Facing Magneto's question, Brian didn't want to pay attention to him. Before killing Black Emperor Shao, the first thing you need to consider is how to kill the mutant of Hellfire Club. Brian's casual words made Magneto fall into deep thought. "Zero," just as Brian said. "It is too early to consider how to kill Black Emperor Shao. The first thing X-Men has to face is not Black Emperor Shao, but several mutants of Hellfire Club. Although with Brian's current strength, he can easily reach the mutants of Hellfire Club, but he is not going to do so. If the X-Men with Professor X and Magneto can't even beat the mutants of Hellfire Club, then Brian will really laugh to death. Again, X-Men will go if there is something. Brian is only responsible for harvesting in the back. Magneto, what are you going to do after killing Black Emperor Shao?" Suddenly, Brian looked at Magneto and asked casually. Magneto was stunned. All along, his only goal in life was to kill Black Emperor Shao. He really hasn't considered what he will do after killing Black Emperor Shao. "I don't know." Magneto shook his head in confusion. "Would you consider working with me?" Brian extended an olive branch to Magneto. Magneto looked at Brian in surprise. He seemed surprised that Brian was going to leave the X-Men. However, Magneto was relieved afterwards. In fact, Magneto knew that X-Men was not his destiny long before he had a rift with Professor X. He and X-Men were just partners after all. Brian, who had the same experience as him, probably thought the same way. Neither he nor Brian could agree with Professor X's philosophy. It was only a matter of time before Brian left X-Men. What Magneto was curious about now was, what was Brian going to do after leaving X-Men? "Brian, what are you going to do?" Magneto asked curiously. "Gather mutants and form a superhero company." Brian told his plan. The reason why he made X-Men a superhero team was to pave the way for the establishment of Vought Corporation next. He believed that a company that cultivated superheroes would be enough to attract those mutants. At that time, Brian only needed to perform an MRI scan on these mutants to easily obtain their brain structures. By then, Brian would not even need to cut their brains to obtain the mutant ability of those who joined Vought Corporation. As for the mutants who didn't join Vought, they definitely continued to cut their brains. Who told them not to join Vought? "How about it, Magneto? Do you want to join my Vought? I can build a superhero team with you as the core, Mutant Brotherhood." Brian's words made Magneto very tempted. "Let's kill Black Emperor Shao first." Magneto was silent for a moment, but still didn't agree to Brian immediately. But he didn't refuse either. In fact, Magneto was still confused at the moment. Only after Black Emperor Shao died, Magneto would identify his beliefs. Fight for the cause of mutant all his life. Brian was not in a hurry. He has plenty of ways to get Magneto to join his Juaway company. "Let's go." Beast Hank and the others have woken up. Brian stood up 3.8 and walked out of the cockpit. Magneto followed closely behind him with a heavy heart. Long before the cockpit, Brian had heard Beast Hank and the others had woken up. Brian could even hear the clear vomiting sounds of Beast Hank and the others. Obviously, although their consciousness was awakened by Professor X, but the alcohol in their bodies still made them have a very serious hangover reaction. Beast Hank was better. Shockwave Alex, Siren Sean Cassidy, and the newcomer Cyclops Scott Summers. As soon as they regained consciousness, they vomited violently. The whole cabin was filled with the smell of alcohol. Brian frowned slightly, then directly opened the cabin door and jumped out of the cabin. Magneto followed closely behind, floating above the plane through magnetic force. Only Professor X was almost vomited by the smell of alcohol in the cabin. "Hank, go fly the plane." Professor X's eyes twitched slightly, and then he gave an order to Beast Hank. "Okay, Professor." Beast Hank staggered to his feet, then came to the cockpit and began to control the supersonic fighter. However, due to the influence of the hangover, the supersonic fighter was shaking and began to shake violently. "I hope that group of X-Men can reach the Gulf of Cuba alive." In the sky, a group of red mist appeared, and the Red Devil appeared beside Brian. Looking at the violently shaking supersonic plane, he couldn't help but pray for the X-Men. "Red Devil, what's the situation with Black Emperor Shao now?" Brian glanced at the Red Devil and fixed it in mid-air with psychokinesis. Then he asked, "Black Emperor Shao energy absorbing takes 6 hours. The Red Devil quickly answered Brian's words. 6 hours? It's enough for the X-Men to kill the members of the Hellfire Club. Chapter 77. Cuban Waters. Brian dived down at an extremely fast speed. Then he landed steadily on a Soviet warship anchored there. With a slight vibration, the Soviet soldiers on the deck all looked at Brian in surprise. After seeing the iconic Red Star cape behind Brian, these Soviet soldiers saluted Brian in unison. As X-Men saved the world, X-Men became the belief of mankind all over the world. Even a 3-year-old child can recognize each member of X-Men at a glance. These Soviet soldiers are definitely no exception. After Brian landed on the deck, these Soviet soldiers recognized Brian's superhero identity. They looked at Brian with admiration. Brian nodded to the group of Soviet soldiers with a smile on his face. Then he looked at the opposite side. In front of Brian, a supersonic fighter was diving down rapidly and then pulled away at high speed at the moment it was about to land on the sea. The entire surface of the water was under the pressure of the supersonic fighter falling rapidly, and the waves were rolling. "X-Men, it's the X-Men." On the sea, dozens of Soviet warships and 3 American aircraft carrier formations cheered huge amounts of cheers after seeing the supersonic fighter. "X-Men will win. Kill Black Emperor Shao, kill that evil NC. Superhero, it's the superhero group of 7. Amid cheers, the supersonic fighter slowly landed on an American aircraft carrier. Then, amid the cheers and expectant eyes of all the military soldiers, the cabin door opened. Professor X walked out with a pale face. Behind Professor X, Beast Hank and others, all with pale faces, staggered down. Even the siren Sean Cassidy, after jumping out of the cabin in a panic, fell directly on the deck of the aircraft carrier. The soldiers who were originally cheering stopped abruptly. They looked at the X-Men with strange eyes. Everyone looked at each other, wondering what happened to this group of superheroes. Just when the military soldiers were silent, Magneto slowly descended from the top of the fighter. Then he landed steadily in front of the X-Men. Magneto. Magneto's very impressive appearance at 30 detonated the entire aircraft carrier formation again. At the same time, Magneto once again gained a group of fanatical fans. These fans also looked at Professor X and others with contempt. In the eyes of these fans, Professor X and others have no superhero style. Professor X didn't need telepathy to know that these military soldiers despised him. He smiled helplessly. Then he glared at Beast Hank. Beast Hank smiled awkwardly. The hangover made him fly the plane in pieces. The violent turbulence almost broke the bones of Professor X and others. And when it was about to land, it almost drove into the sea. "Okay, you guys take a break first and recover from the hangover as soon as possible," Professor X said to the X-Men members around him. Then he pressed his right hand on his temple. "General James, can you find the nuclear-powered submarine of Black Emperor Shao?" Professor X sent a telepathic message to General James, the highest commander of the America aircraft carrier formation. In fact, when they were about to reach the waters of Cuba, Professor X had already contacted General James with telepathic power and told James about the situation of Black Emperor Shao. Let James use the sonar detector of the aircraft carrier formation to search for the location of Black Emperor Shao's nuclear submarine. "Professor X, I'm sorry, our sonar did not find the nuclear submarine of Black Emperor Shah. According to our analysis, the nuclear submarine of Black Emperor Shah should be the latest generation of submarines of the Soviet Union. The depth of their dive has exceeded the detection range of our sonar. General James quickly came to the deck and answered Professor X's question directly, without any courtesy. Can't detect it? Professor X frowned slightly, and then his mind connected with General Alexei, the commander of the Soviet warship. General Alexei, do you have a way to search for the Black Emperor Zhao's nuclear submarine? Next to Brian, General Alexei, who was covered with medals, nodded to Brian and then answered Professor X. We can use anti-submarine torpedoes to try to force Black Emperor Shah's nuclear-powered submarine to surface. Hearing General Alexei's words, Professor X smiled. He glanced at Magneto. Then he gave General Alexei an order. General Alexei, launch the anti-submarine torpedoes. Yes, Professor X. General Alexei saluted in the direction of Professor X. Then he began to give orders. Dozens of Soviet warships started moving at once, and anti-submarine torpedoes were quickly launched as the warships started moving. Because the location of the nuclear submarine could not be determined. So the Soviet warships could only use themselves as the center and spread the anti-submarine torpedoes to hundreds of miles of sea area. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Under the sea, one anti-submarine torpedo after another dived rapidly. After reaching a distance of 100 meters from the sea surface, all the anti-submarine torpedoes exploded. Balls of explosion flames spread out in the water. A huge amount of explosion vortex suddenly appeared in the sea water, and in the waters less than 2 nautical miles away from the explosion vortex. Black Emperor Zhao's nuclear-powered submarine was hovering quietly. The members of the Hellfire Club inside were patiently waiting for the decisive battle. Suddenly, they felt a violent shaking of the nuclear-powered submarine. Then the violent water flow washed the nuclear submarine over several times. The Hellfire Club, caught off guard, club members were thrown to the ground. F***K, what's going on? Angel couldn't help cursing, and the insect wings behind her quickly spread out and flew into the air. Our submarine was attacked by an anti-submarine torpedo. Ursa Major was awakened by the violent shaking. He came to the submarine's observation tower, looked outside, and then his face changed drastically. Around their nuclear submarine, anti-submarine torpedoes were breaking through the water and then exploded. The vortex generated by the explosion made the nuclear submarine shake more violently. What is an anti-submarine torpedo? Angel was confused. She was just a stripper and didn't know what an anti-submarine torpedo was. Ursa Major was stunned for a moment, then looked at the others. The entire Hellfire Club members were confused. Apparently, like Angel, they didn't know what an anti-submarine torpedo was. It seems that mutant also needs popular education. Ursa Major was stunned for a long time, and then he couldn't help but complain. Before becoming a mutant, Ursa Major was a political commissar of the Soviet military and graduated from Moscow State University, a top student. Then Ursa Major ignored this group of illiterate mutants. He quickly came to the submarine's cockpit and then began to skillfully operate the submarine to surface. He didn't want to be killed by these anti-submarine torpedoes before waiting for the decisive battle with the X-Men. Clatter! As the nuclear submarine broke through the water and surfaced, a red dot suddenly appeared on the sonar detector of the warship on the sea. Found it, Professor X. We found the nuclear submarine of the Black Emperor Shah. General James looked at the sonar detector in the control room with excitement. He reported to Professor X with a little excitement. Although General James is nearly 70 years old, he still has a heart to be a hero. Fighting side by side with superhero X-Men at this moment makes him feel proud. Siren, precise positioning. Professor X looked at the red dot in the sonar detector and then ordered the siren Sean Cassidy in the X-Men. Yes, Professor X. After the bumpy ride, the siren's hangover condition has improved a lot. After hearing Professor X's order, he jumped directly from the warship and sank directly into the water. The siren in the water opened its mouth and sent out a sound wave. The infrasound wave caused ripples in the water. Then the siren pressed his right hand on his temple, and his consciousness connected to the mental network established by Professor X. Professor X, I have located the position of the nuclear submarine. After hearing the siren's mental transmission, Professor X smiled approvingly. Then he turned and nodded to Magneto. Eric. Without Professor X's instructions, Magneto opened his right hand and released his ability. The huge magnetic field quickly penetrated into the sea water. Rumble. Under the sea, the nuclear submarine shook violently, and then it seemed to be caught by a pair of invisible hands and began to rise at a very fast speed. The entire water surface, like boiling water, constantly rolled around. Magneto pressed down with his left hand, and his body slowly floated in the air under the action of magnetic force. As Magneto floated, a huge amount of nuclear-powered submarines were pulled out of the water by Magneto's ability and pulled into the air. Brian. After pulling the nuclear-powered submarine into the air, Professor X sent a telepathic message to Brian. Understood. Brian snapped his fingers, and then the whole person instantly flew into the sky. He flew in front of the nuclear submarine at a very fast speed. Then, under everyone's gaze, Brian flew under the nuclear submarine and lifted it up with one hand. Super strength was clearly revealed at this moment. Brian lifted the nuclear submarine, then exerted a little force and threw it directly onto a deserted island hundreds of meters away. Boom! The nuclear submarine fell heavily in the center of the deserted island. The powerful impact caused the nuclear submarine to break directly in the middle. The members of the Hellfire Club inside were even broken and bleeding. Done! In midair, Brian clapped his hands lightly, and then sent a telepathic message to Professor X. Professor X. Magneto, other X-Men members. They were all shocked by Brian's super strength. That was a nuclear submarine weighing thousands of tons. Brian actually lifted it up with one hand. Moreover, looking at his light-hearted look, it was as if this was not a nuclear submarine, but a model toy. Homelander, Homelander. After a brief shock, all the soldiers of the Soviet warships and the America aircraft carrier formation cheered enthusiastically. They saw Brian's super strength with their own eyes. That's why they regarded Brian as a real Superman. Brian, have you copied the super strength again? Magneto looked at Brian with great envy. With the endorsement of Beast Hank, all X-Men recognized Brian's copying ability. That's why Brian showed super strength. Neither Magneto nor Professor X had any doubts. Brian, take us to the island. After being surprised, Professor X's face was solemn, and he gave Brian another order. Brian nodded, and then released the calendar. All X-Men members quickly floated into the air. Then, under the leadership of Brian, all X-Men landed on the island. Next to the broken nuclear submarine, a bear roar sounded from the nuclear submarine. Then the hatch of the nuclear submarine facing the X-Men was blown away by the huge force. Angel was the first to fly out of the hatch of the nuclear submarine. Ahem, those damn X-Men. Angel had a bruise on her forehead, and she grimaced in pain. As Angel walked out of the nuclear submarine, a 3-meter tall Siberian brown bear jumped out with 2 Hellfire members. Thanks, Ursa Major. Bloody Kate flirted with Ursa Major again, but this time, she only got the bear's gaze. Bloody Kate smiled awkwardly, then walked behind Ursa Major. Mutant Claude also looked at Ursa Major with gratitude. If it weren't for Ursa Major, he would have gone to see God. After all, his physical fitness is just that of an ordinary person. Okay, everyone is here, right? A red mist quickly appeared, and the Red Devil appeared next to the Hellfire Club. Where is Mr. Polly? The Red Devil looked at his camp. Angel, Ursa Major, Blood-Eyed Kate, Claude. The only thing missing is Mutant Polly. This made the Red Devil frown slightly. Red Devil, I'm here. A voice sounded from the nuclear submarine behind him. Then a young white man who looked like a ghost and was glowing with golden light came out. You are? Polly. The Red Devil looked at the young white man who looked like a ghost with some surprise and said hesitantly, Yes, Mr. Red Devil, I'm Polly. The ghost man nodded and looked at his body with some bitterness. Just now, when Brian threw the nuclear submarine onto the island, the dying mutant Polly was pierced directly into the heart by a piece of steel. His body died instantly, and at the moment of death, the mind protection disconnected his mind and body, allowing him to survive in a state of mind consciousness. Your mind protection ability is really amazing. The Red Devil looked at the young Polly in the ghost state with surprise and couldn't help but praise. Yes, Mr. Red Devil, I think so too. Ghost Polly nodded with a smile on his face. Getting rid of his old body made him feel very good. Mind protection? Opposite Polly, Brian. with his super hearing, clearly heard the conversation between the Red Devil and Polly. When he learned that Polly's mind protection could actually protect the immortality of the mind, Brian smiled. This is really a very magical ability. But it's mine now. Brian is determined to obtain Mutant Polly's ability. Professor X, Magneto, I leave this to you. I'm going to the nuclear power room to look for Black Emperor Shaw. Brian said to Professor X and Magneto, and then flew directly into the broken nuclear submarine. After entering the nuclear submarine, Brian lightly snapped his fingers. The invisible perception instantly enveloped the entire island. Black Emperor Shao, Level 5 Mutant. Ability, Energy Absorbing, Release Energy, Energy Strengthening. Professor X, Level 5 Mutant. Ability, Telepathy, Mind Splitting, Mind Transfer. Magneto, Level 4 Mutant. Ability, Magnetic Field Control, Control Metal. Beast Hank, Level 4 Mutant. Ability, Beastization, Beast Perception, Intuition. Ursa Major, Level 4 Mutant. Ability, Giant Bear Transformation, Bear Strength, Bear Physique, Super Recovery. Polly, Level 4 Mutant. Ability, Mind Shield, Mind Protection, Dead. Ghost Polly, Level Mutant. Blood-Eye Kate, Level 4 Mutant. Ability, Control other people's minds by touching the skin. As Brian released Perception ability, all the information about the mutants on this island was presented to Brian, including the mutants' level, ability, and location. Even the survival status was clearly displayed. Found it, Mutant Polly's body. Brian smiled. He had found the location of Mutant Polly's body. Chapter 78. Cuban Waters, Unnamed Desert Island. In the broken nuclear submarine, Brian raised his eyebrows slightly, with a surprised expression on his face. Just now, Brian released the perception ability. The entire island, all the mutants appeared in Brian's mind. That's why Brian discovered that in addition to the Hellfire Club and the X-Men, there were 2 more mutants who had just landed on the island. Sabretooth Victor, a level mutant. Ability, Sabretooth Beast, Bloodthirsty Instinct, Self-Healing Factor. Wolverine Logan, a level 3 mutant. Ability, Wolverine Beast, Warlike Instinct, Self-Healing Factor. Even Wolverine and Sabretooth are here. The first battle of mutants is getting more and more lively. Brian's face was full of amusement. Brian didn't expect Wolverine and Sabretooth to come unexpectedly. It also made him curious about the motives of these 2 people. Brian's ears moved slightly. An invisible wave spread out. Super hearing released. The conversation between Wolverine and Sabretooth, who had just landed on the island, was clearly heard by Brian. At this moment, on the edge of the nameless deserted island, 2 figures were paddling in the water at a high speed, like 2 swordfish, and quickly swam to the shore of the island. Ahem, Victor, what are you going to do? Wolverine Logan had just climbed to the shore when he started coughing violently. He was not good at swimming and suffocated many times in the water. However, the self-healing factor made him still alive even if he drowned. After spitting out more than a dozen mouthfuls of water in succession, Wolverine Logan stood up from the ground. He took off his American Navy uniform, bare-chested, and asked Sabretooth Victor, who was quietly waiting for Wolverine in front. Logan, you really should learn to swim. Sabretooth Victor did not answer Wolverine's words either. Instead, he looked at the somewhat embarrassed Wolverine with some sarcasm and said meaningfully, "You won't die anyway, so why learn these?" Wolverine Logan shrugged and said somewhat meaninglessly, "Logan, my dear mutant brother, you are wasting your time." Sabretooth Victor frowned slightly and said with some regret, "Aren't you also wasting time?" Logan took out a cigar from his pocket, looked at the soaked cigar, and threw it on the ground helplessly. These years, he has only been a young man. Roar, Logan, do you think I'm wasting time? Sabretooth Victor suddenly became irritable. He turned around, and the sharp claws of his right hand popped out instantly, then pierced into Logan's chest, and then lifted him up. That's why you're weaker than me. You've been taking things as they come and going with the flow these years. And I've been using war to sharpen my bloodthirsty instincts, train my fighting skills, and learn various skills that are conducive to survival. Now, even with my eyes closed, I can easily step on you. Sabretooth Victor's eyes were full of bloodthirsty light, especially after smelling the blood. His various physical qualities have increased exponentially. Victor is enjoying the present moment very much. Just as he said, For 200 years, Sabretooth Victor did not dare to slack off for a moment. Since he was a child, he has been consciously honing his fighting skills and his variant ability. In these 200 years, Victor and Logan have been wandering on the battlefield. Victor constantly uses war and killing to train his ability and cultivate his bloodthirsty instincts. And in his spare time, Victor will learn various fighting skills and survival skills. After training and learning day after day, Victor now, in terms of single combat ability, 10 Logans can't compare to him. Victor now can adapt to various extreme environments, and he can use his instincts to maximize his variant abilities. He will even become stronger as he kills. However, as his bloodthirsty instinct became stronger, Victor became more and more addicted to killing. This also created a gap between him and Wolverine Logan. F***K. Victor, let me go. Wolverine Logan was pierced in the chest by Sabretooth Victor's claws, and the intense pain made him struggle violently. Logan, haven't you adapted to the pain yet? Victor looked at Wolverine Logan, took a deep breath, suppressed the anger in his heart, threw Logan to the ground, and said earnestly. Wolverine Logan glanced at the quickly healing wounds on his body, was silent for a moment, and then questioned again. Victor, what on earth are you doing on this island? ? Facing Wolverine Logan's continuous questioning, Sabretooth Victor moved his hands and said his purpose with an indescribable excitement. This island gathers the most powerful mutants in the world. Whether it's X-Men or Hellfire Club, they are all very powerful. There is no doubt that this will be a peak showdown of mutants. As brothers, how can we not participate in it personally? Jimmy, start choosing sides now. Sabretooth Victor smiled excitedly, and then patted Wolverine Logan's shoulder hard and said impatiently, Victor, are you going to join the war between mutants again? Wolverine Logan frowned. He didn't want to join this mutant war at all. Jimmy, haven't we always been like this? Every time Sabretooth wanted to persuade Wolverine Logan, he would call Logan's nickname Jimmy. Sabretooth Victor knew very well what Wolverine Logan's weaknesses were. Too kind, and attaching importance to feelings. Okay, I choose X-Men sure enough. Wolverine Logan was convinced by Sabretooth Victor. He was silent for a moment, and then chose the X-Men camp. Then I can only choose Hellfire Club. Sabretooth Victor smiled, and his bloodthirsty smile made Victor look like a ferocious beast. He got on all fours, like a vigorous tiger, and rushed quickly in the direction of Hellfire Club. Behind Sabretooth Victor, Wolverine Logan sighed helplessly, and then also walked in the direction of X-Men. Very good. Now I have another variant ability to choose. In the submarine, Brian also smiled very brightly. With Wolverine Logan and Sabretooth Victor joining the battlefield, Brian has another variant ability to choose from. Last time, because of Professor X, Brian let Wolverine Logan go and did not get the self-healing factor he had been thinking about. This time, what Brian did not expect was that Wolverine and Sabretooth, the only two mutants with self-healing factors and immortality, actually came to him automatically. This is really an unexpected surprise. Brian's mind moved, and a golden mark merged into the bodies of Wolverine and Sabretooth. This golden mark is a mark that Brian left in the bodies of the two people using the perception ability. Now, even if these two people run to the ends of the earth, Cayenne can easily find them. After doing all this, Brian found the body of mutant Polly with ease. Looking at the old body in front of him, Brian did not waste time. Directly used psychokinesis cut his forehead. A few seconds later, Brian has obtained the ability of mutant Polly. Mind protection. At this moment, a dazzling spiritual light appeared in Brian's spiritual world. This spiritual light illuminated Brian's entire spiritual world. At the same time, a golden film was generated at the edge of Brian's spiritual world, protecting his spiritual world. As long as the spiritual light in the center of Brian's mind is not extinguished, his spiritual consciousness will not be destroyed. Even if his body dies, he can still survive with his spiritual consciousness. And under the full level of one click, Brian's spiritual protection can cut off the connection with the body at any time, making the spiritual consciousness out of the body like a soul astral. The out-of-body spiritual consciousness has all the perception of the body and can use all the abilities of the body. In addition to being able to protect himself mentally, Brian can also cast a mental shield on others. It can be said that after obtaining the ability of Mutant Polly, Brian is completely fearless of Professor X's telepathy power. After obtaining the ability of Mutant Polly, Brian did not go to the nuclear power room to look for Black Emperor Shao, even though he is very strong now. But facing Black Emperor Shao, a mutant who is also cheating, the two are still 55-50. At this moment, Brian glanced in the direction of the nuclear power room, and there was a hint of expectation in his eyes. There is one thing that Black Emperor Shao said is right. The energy fluctuations generated by the nuclear explosion can indeed activate the X gene hidden in the human body. Brian is ready to let Black Emperor Shao absorb the energy, and then let the Red Devil take Black Emperor Shao to New York. Give New York a nuclear explosion. I believe that after the nuclear explosion, the number of mutants in New York will show an exponential increase. At this stage in 1962, mutants are really too few. However, it is too early to say these now. Brian casually snapped his fingers, and then the mind protection he just got was activated. A golden light flashed on his body. Then a solid spiritual consciousness body left Brian's body and came out. Brian looked at his body. Compared to Mutant Polly's ghost-like, very illusory spiritual consciousness body, Brian's spiritual consciousness body is extremely solid. It looks not much different from a real person. Invisible. Brian released the invisibility ability from the Invisible Man for the first time. His spiritual consciousness body instantly became transparent. Compared to the body, which needs to take off all clothes to be invisible, the invisibility of the spiritual consciousness body is very convenient. Brian, in the invisible state, walked out of the nuclear submarine and came out. At this moment, the Hellfire Club and the X-Men outside were on the verge of a fight. Both sides lined up. Everyone looked solemn. No one spoke. The atmosphere of the entire island became extremely depressing. The war was about to break out. However, at such a tense moment, a tiger roar suddenly sounded. Everyone's eyes subconsciously looked in the direction of the sound source. A sturdy figure quickly came to the front of the Hellfire Club members. "Hey, my mutant brothers, I'm Sabretooth Victor. Are you interested in me joining the Hellfire Club?" The one who broke into the first battle of mutant was definitely Sabretooth Victor. The people in the Hellfire Club looked at each other in surprise. Obviously, they didn't expect that there would be mutants willing to join the Hellfire Club when the war was imminent. "Sabretooth Victor, I'm White Queen Angel. On behalf of the Hellfire Club, I welcome you to join." When the other Hellfire members were stunned, Angel stood up and welcomed them solemnly. Sabretooth Victor frowned and glanced at Angel. Obviously, he was not interested in Angel. But Sabretooth Victor didn't say anything. After all, his purpose was just to participate in this mutant war. Joining the Hellfire Club was just to make the battle more interesting. "X-Men, come and fight. Now, I just want to kill you. Or be killed by you." Sabretooth Victor came to the Hellfire Club camp. Then his hands popped out claws and roared at the X-Men with a crazy face. After Sabretooth Victor joined the Hellfire Club, Ghost Polly released a mental shield to Sabretooth. This made Professor X unable to explore Sabretooth Victor's memory. "Sabretooth Victor? Where did he come from?" Magneto frowned and looked at Sabretooth Victor. He was obviously surprised by Victor's sudden intrusion. The other X-Men also looked at each other in bewilderment. Just when the X-Men were confused, Wolverine Logan, shirtless, came late. "Everyone, can I join the X-Men?" Wolverine Logan's voice attracted the attention of the X-Men. They looked at this muscular and powerful Wolverine Logan and fell into silence again. "You are? Logan?" Professor X looked at Wolverine Logan and was stunned for a moment. He immediately remembered the scene when he recruited Wolverine Logan. Magneto's face was also a little ugly, but he still remembered what Wolverine Logan said when he refused to join the X-Men. "Get lost. Welcome to join Logan. I am Professor X." Although he wanted to reject Logan directly, the battle with the Hellfire Club was about to start. Professor X could only put aside the past and agreed to Wolverine Logan's application to join. Wolverine Logan smiled, then stood in front of the X-Men and Magneto, stretched out his bone claws, and activated the belligerent factor in his body. "X-Men, assemble!" Wolverine Logan roared, and then rushed to the Hellfire Club on the opposite side. Seeing that Wolverine Logan had taken over his leadership position as soon as he arrived, Professor X's eyes twitched. "Hello, Wong Wong. Magneto's face was even more ugly. Obviously, he was very unhappy that Wolverine Logan had stolen the limelight from the X-Men as soon as he arrived. X-Men, prepare for battle. Professor X issued a battle order, and all the X-Men rushed towards the Hellfire Club members. The battle started instantly. Boom. Claude, a new member of the Hellfire Club, took the lead. He clenched his fists and then smashed them hard on the ground. Boom. With his movements, the whole island began to shake violently. A huge amount of cracks appeared on the ground under his feet. The cracks quickly spread towards the X-Men. The X-Men, who were caught off guard, fell to the ground. The strong earthquake created by Claude made it impossible for the X-Men to stand. Boom. The ground under his feet cracked rapidly under the impact of the strong earthquake created by Claude. A ground vibe directly knocked Wolverine Logan flying forward. Boom. Shockwave Alex barely managed to stabilize his body, and then a red energy beam was released from his chest. Energy Shockwave instantly rushed towards Claude. Earthquake. Seeing the energy shockwave coming, Claude clenched his fists, veins on his arms bulged, and then he slammed them hard on the ground. Boom. The ground under his feet was directly shaken up. The thick rock layer directly blocked the energy shockwave. Claude, good job. Blood-Eye Kate behind Claude couldn't help but whistled at Claude. Claude had no time to respond to Blood-Eye Kate. The earthquake he just released was very close to him, and he was also unstable at this moment, and fell directly to the ground. Boom. Cyclops Scott saw Claude fall to the ground and fired a laser directly at Claude. Red Devil, save me. Seeing that he was no longer able to avoid the laser, Claude screamed in panic. Chapter 79. In the waters of Cuba, on an unnamed desert island, a war for mutant is starting. The members of X-Men and Hellfire Club are all firing at full force at this moment. At the moment when the battle just started, the panicked cry for help from Claude, a new member of the Hellfire Club, was heard. Because of the earthquake, he also fell to the ground under the earthquake. This is not the most fatal. The real fatality is the laser released by Cyclops Scott. Red Devil, save me. Seeing that he was no longer able to avoid the laser, Claude screamed in panic. Bang! A ball of red mist wrapped Claude, and then the Red Devil took Claude to another place. After saving Claude, the Red Devil teleported again and appeared next to Magneto. However, when the red mist just appeared, Magneto had already reacted. He opened his right hand, and the coin instantly hit the Red Devil that emerged from the red element. Ding! Facing Magneto's sudden attack, the Red Devil's tail instantly blocked the coin. However, this also exposed the Red Devil to Magneto. Magneto opened his right hand, and the scattered nuclear submarine steel fragments on the ground quickly floated up, and then quickly attacked the Red Devil. Bang! Facing Magneto's attack, the Red Devil could only helplessly turn into red mist again and disappear. With the brief confrontation between the Red Devil and Magneto, the war between the X-Men and the Hellfire Club was completely launched. Hellfire, move out. Angel roared, and the insect wings behind her flapped quickly, and she quickly flew into the air. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. In the sky, Angel flew towards the X-Men quickly, constantly spitting out strong acid saliva from her mouth. Facing Angel's highly corrosive strong acid saliva, the X-Men could only dodge in embarrassment. Because of Angel's attack, the X-Men song was able to fight on their own. I'm glad I left the X-Men. You X-Men are too weak. Angel saw that her attack was effective and immediately started to speak venomously. As the siren Sean Cassidy, who was in the same period as Angel, his face instantly turned gloomy. B*****ch. The siren roared, and then a screaming sound wave came out of her mouth. Bang! The screaming sound wave directly knocked Angel several meters away in the sky, and her body kept spinning in the air. The siren sent out another sound wave, and the whole person rose from the ground and flew towards Angel quickly. After quickly approaching Angel, the siren screamed at Angel directly. TSK. Angel was hit by the sound wave, and her ears instantly bled. The whole body lost balance and fell directly from midair to the ground. F***K. Angel rolled on the ground 337 in a mess. The deafness of her ears made her dizzy and angry. Facing the siren swooping down from the low altitude, Angel spitted at the siren frantically. facing the dense and strong acid saliva that was attacking as fast as bullets. The siren could only send out a sound wave again to pull its body up urgently. Tisk, chickens fighting each other. In the sky, Brian turned on the melon-eating mode, watching the battle between the X-Men and the Hellfire Club members while commenting on them. For Brian, both the siren and Angel were just chickens fighting each other. The battle was not valuable. Compared with the battle between the siren and Angel, Brian turned his attention to Sabretooth Victor. Roar. Just as the siren was frantically avoiding Angel's attack, a tiger roar came from below. Then Sabretooth Victor jumped up and rushed directly to the siren. Bang! The siren in the sky was directly pounced down by Sabretooth Victor. At this moment, Sabretooth Victor stepped on the siren, and the claws of both hands popped out. Without any unnecessary movements, the claws pierced the siren's throat and heart. Fast, accurate, and ruthless, even the angle was very tricky. Sharp nails, shining with metallic luster. Boom! A wave of energy shockwave quickly attacked and directly knocked Sabretooth Victor out. Thanks, Shockwave. The siren was still in shock, let out a howl, flew into the sky again, and then nodded to Shockwave Alex below. Be careful of Angel. Shockwave Alex's reminder made the siren in the air stunned for a moment. Then his ears heard the sound of wings flapping in the air above his head. The siren quickly let out a howl to the sky and dodged quickly. However, the siren's reaction was a little slow. Above his head, Angel flew up again and sprayed a mouthful of strong acid saliva at the siren. Chi. The strong acid saliva did not hit the siren, but landed on the hang glider in the siren's right hand. The strong corrosiveness caused a big hole in the hang glider made of special materials. Without the hang glider, the siren crashed directly from the sky and landed heavily on the ground. You are AB******ch, siren. Angel was suspended in the air and cursed loudly. Angel versus siren, Angel won. Brian turned his eyes to the bottom of Angel. Compared to the chickens pecking each other, he would rather see the Ursa Major tyrannize Wolverine Logan. Roar. Under Angel, the Ursa Major, a level 4 mutant, was firing at full power. He roared, and his body, which was 3.5 meters tall, expanded again. Huge amounts of bear paws waved, causing ripples in the air. This shows how powerful the Ursa Major is. Bang! Wolverine Logan, who rushed forward, was blown away by the huge amounts of bear paws. Wolverine Logan, who was 1.8 meters tall, stood in front of the Ursa Major like a child. Wolverine Logan's body hit a rock dozens of meters away, and the huge amounts of rock was directly shattered. At the same time, a huge amounts of bear paw print appeared on Wolverine Logan's chest. The blow of the Ursa Major broke Wolverine Logan's sternum. It really hurts. Wolverine Logan grimaced in pain. However, a fatal injury was nothing for Logan, who had the self-healing factor. He stood up shakily, and the injuries on his body were completely healed in a breath. Swoosh. The belligerent factor in Wolverine Logan's body was completely activated. He roared at the Ursa Major, and the bone claws of both hands popped out quickly. Wolverine Logan roared and rushed towards the Ursa Major again at the speed of a 100-meter sprint. Roar. A similar beast roar sounded behind Wolverine Logan. Beast Hank landed on all fours at this moment and quickly passed Wolverine Logan. Then, at a distance of 2 meters from the Ursa Major, he jumped up and quickly pounced on the Ursa Major. The beast form gave Hank the speed of a monkey, and Beast Hank was very good at climbing. After falling on the Ursa Major, Beast Hank used all 4 legs, and in just a breath, he had already reached the shoulder of the Ursa Major. The Ursa Major tried to catch Beast Hank several times, but failed. Seeing Beast Hank's claws piercing his eyes, the Ursa Major roared, then opened his fangs and bit Beast Hank's claws directly. Bang! The Ursa Major shook his head suddenly, and Beast Hank was thrown out directly. The Ursa Major raised his right hand and punched Beast Hank in the chest. The huge amounts of power made Beast Hank spit blood instantly, and his body was directly smashed into the ground. Bear power. After knocking Beast Hank out, the Ursa Major let out a hearty howl. Wolverine Logan took advantage of the Ursa Major's howl and stabbed the Ursa Major's abdomen with his claws. Crack! The heavy muscles of the Ursa Major directly broke Wolverine's bone claws. 6 broken bone claws made Wolverine Logan scream in pain. Brian, who was watching the battle, looked at Wolverine Logan with some pity. Wolverine Logan now does not have the indestructible adamantium steel claws. His bone claws are still very fragile. Even with just a little force, his bone claws can be broken. Under Brian's gaze, the Ursa Major directly grabbed Logan's arm and began to slap it on the ground. The scene at this moment was like the Hulk hitting the evil god Loki. The huge amounts of power made the ground vibrate. When the Ursa Major let go of Wolverine Logan's arm, Wolverine Logan had already suffered comminuted fractures all over his body. Even with the self-healing factor, it would take some time to recover. Roar. The Ursa Major roared to the sky again. However, Ursa Major did not notice that in the pit under his feet, Beast Hank was quietly taking out a syringe from his somewhat torn clothes. Inside the syringe was a crystal-clear red test tube. TSK. Beast Hank injected the red reagent into his body without hesitation. A ball of red light appeared on his body. Then his injuries recovered at a speed visible to the naked eye. Beast Hank's most powerful dash is not his beast-like physical fitness, but his wisdom. Long before, he had purified a special healing factor from Father Ace's blood by studying Father Ace's blood. He used scientific methods to strengthen this healing factor so that it could make dead man flesh and bones like Brian's blood. Definitely, because the healing factor was extracted from the blood left by Father Asa. Beast Hank cannot mass-produce this healing potion. At this moment, as Beast Hank injected the healing potion, his physical injuries instantly recovered. Then Beast Hank rushed to the Ursa Major again. This time, he took out another tube of reagent from his pocket. When approaching the Ursa Major, Beast Hank threw the reagent to the Ursa Major without hesitation. Click! The Ursa Major easily used his bare paw to help the reagent thrown by Beast Hank, and then exerted a little force to directly crush the tube of reagent. As the reagent was crushed, the liquid inside instantly vaporized, forming a thick blue mist that enveloped the Ursa Major. The Siberian brown bear was caught off guard and inhaled some of the blue mist. His body suddenly shrank from 3.5 meters to 3 meters. "What did you do to me?" The Ursa Major was shocked. He felt that there seemed to be a shackle in his body, which was suppressing his mutant gene. "This is the mutant gene inhibitor I developed." Beast Hank quickly moved away from the Ursa Major. The Ursa Major roared again and again. However, the more he roared, the more blue mist he inhaled. His body shrank rapidly at a speed visible to the naked eye. It was not until he shrank to 2 meters that he finally reacted and flapped his 2 bare paws vigorously. The blue mist quickly faded and disappeared. The Ursa Major's body finally stopped shrinking. Roar. The Ursa Major roared again and again, but because of the mutant gene inhibitor, the deterrent power of the Siberian brown bear was greatly reduced. Wolverine Logan and Beast Hank began to attack the Ursa Major frantically at the same time. The weakening of power made the Ursa Major exhausted. Wolverine Logan clenched his fists, and the new bone claws instantly pierced into the Ursa Major's chest. 6 blood holes appeared on the Ursa Major's chest. The Ursa Major roared in pain, and then the bear claws directly scratched Wolverine Logan's neck. Swish! The bear claws cut Logan's trachea, and blood gushed out immediately. The strong suffocation caused Wolverine Logan's attack to pause briefly. Then Wolverine Logan was thrown out by Ursa Major. TSK. As soon as he threw Logan out, Beast Hank stabbed Ursa Major's arm with a mutant gene inhibitor. F***K. Ursa Major angrily knocked Beast Hank away, and then his body could no longer maintain the state of a Siberian brown bear. He turned back into a human. Pissed. The moment Ursa Major turned back into a human, Wolverine Logan stabbed his bone claws into Ursa Major's chest, penetrated all the way, and directly pierced Ursa Major's body. Bang! Level 4 mutant Ursa Major was pierced through the heart by Wolverine, becoming the first mutant to be killed in this mutant war. F***K. Ursa Major is dead. The only ones who did not join the battle were Blood-Eye Kate, who was hiding behind Mutant Claude, and Ghost Polly. After seeing Ursa Major die, Blood-Eye Kate's face changed drastically. You know, in terms of combat power, Ursa Major is second only to Black Emperor Shao and the Hellfire Club. However, now Ursa Major was killed by the X-Men. This made Blood-Eye Kate feel full of crisis. Red Devil. Blood-Eye Kate shouted to the Red Devil, who was confronting Magneto. The Red Devil instantly teleported to the side of Blood-Eye Kate. Then Blood-Eye Kate casually pointed at Cyclops Scott. Understood. The Red Devil nodded, then turned into a ball of red mist and appeared in front of Cyclops Scott. Cyclops Scott is not Magneto. He didn't even understand what happened. A red tail grabbed his arm. Then the red mist enveloped Cyclops Scott. When Cyclops Scott reacted, he was already standing in front of Blood-Eye Kate. Follow my orders. Under the astonished gaze of Cyclops Scott, Blood-Eye Kate grabbed Cyclops Scott's shoulders. Then Cyclops Scott found that he could not control his body. Holy crap, what ability is this? Cyclops Scott screamed in horror. However, no matter how Cyclops Scott struggled, he could not resist the order of Blood-Eye Kate. Cyclops, kill Shockwave. Blood-Eye Kate gave the order to Cyclops Scott. Although Cyclops Scott was full of resistance, his body began to face Shockwave Alex completely out of control. Boom. A laser was released from Cyclops Scott's eyes. It instantly hit Shockwave Alex. Shockwave was caught off guard and was directly hit by the laser. He fell to the ground and his life or death was unknown. After the Hellfire Club lost one member, the X-Men also lost one member. Charles. Seeing Cyclops Scott being controlled, Magneto looked at Professor X with a gloomy face. Ghost Polly is releasing a mental shield to Scott. I need time to break through Scott's mental shield. Professor X said loudly, pressing his right hand on his temple. In Professor X's eyes, Ghost Polly was releasing a transparent mental shield with both hands. The shield blocked Professor X's mental power from Scott's body. Professor X was trying hard to release his mental power. A mental shock that only Professor X, Ghost Polly and Brian could see began to spread wildly with Professor X as the center. The mental shield applied to Scott was shaky under Professor X's mental shock, and mental cracks appeared on it. Professor X, I won't let you break through my mental protection so easily. Ghost Polly's body flashed with golden light, strengthening the release of the mental shield. The mental shield that was originally shaky began to become stable again. Chapter 80. Boom. On the deserted island, the war between mutants has completely entered a white-hot stage. After Cyclops Scott was controlled by Blood-Eye Kate and defeated Shockwave Alex, Professor X finally couldn't sit still. He directly pressed his right hand on his temple and began to burst out his mental power with all his strength. As a level 5 psychic mutant, Professor X's mental power is so huge. At the moment of release, the mental shields of all the people in the Hellfire Club were shaken. It seemed that the mental shields in their mental world would be disintegrated by Professor X's mental force field in the next second. The mental tide formed continued to constantly impact Ghost Polly's mental consciousness. Facing Professor X's mental impact, Ghost Polly constantly released the mental shields with both hands, trying hard to prevent the mental shields on the members of the Hellfire Club from collapsing. But this has used up all his mind. As Ghost Polly fully released his mental protection ability, his mental consciousness was turbulent. The consciousness that was originally illusory became even more scattered. If it weren't for the light of the mind guarding his consciousness all the time, I'm afraid that now Polly's consciousness has collapsed and he can't die anymore. Even so, Ghost Polly couldn't hold on any longer. F***K. End the battle quickly, I can't hold on any longer. Ghost Polly screamed in pain. Red Devil, we have to fight quickly and decisively. Angel, who was in the air, suddenly changed her face after hearing Ghost Polly's words. As a former member of X-Men, she knew very well how powerful Professor X was. Now their minds are protected by a mind shield. They can barely resist Professor X's mind power. Once their mind shields collapse, Professor X will probably be able to control all the mutants of the Hellfire Club in an instant. So, after realizing the seriousness of the matter, Angel quickly approached the Red Devil, ready to fight quickly, and the other members of the Hellfire Club also quickly moved closer. Hellfire Club gathered together again because of the death of Ursa Major. Now, there are only 5.5 members left in Hellfire Club: Red Devil, Angel, Blood-Eyed Kate, Mutant Claude, and Sabretooth Victor, who just joined Hellfire. Ghost Polly can only be considered half a mutant because he lost his body. Definitely, if you count the controlled Cyclops Scott. Hellfire Club has 6.5 mutants. On the other hand, on the X-Men side, Brian has been eating melons in the sky and has no intention of intervening in the mutant war. Shockwave Alex is even more unknown. The battlefield is left with Professor X, Magneto, Beast Hank, Wolverine Logan, and the Siren who lost the flight ability and fell to the ground with serious injuries. Among them, Professor X needs to use all his mental power to break Ghost Polly's mental protection. Before the mental shield is broken, Professor K can be ignored. Therefore, the only ones who are capable of fighting among the X-Men are Magneto, Wolverine Logan, Beast Hank. It is already a routine operation to block Professor X's mental power at the beginning. In midair, Brian looked at Professor X standing behind and couldn't help but complain. He obviously has the strongest mental power in the world, but he is repeatedly targeted. This is ironic. Not only Brian couldn't stand it, even Magneto on the battlefield couldn't stand it. Charles, you really should study how to make your mind work under the condition of mind shielding. Magneto glanced at Professor X and said earnestly. Then Magneto opened his right hand, and the coin in his hand flew straight to Angel at a speed that broke the sound barrier. Swoosh. The coin instantly pierced Angel's forehead, and then stained with blood, came out from the back of Angel's head. Bang! Angel fell to the ground instantly, deader than dead. Magneto swung his right hand, and the coin instantly changed direction, instantly piercing through the mutant clawed below Angel, piercing his heart. After becoming a level 4 mutant, Magneto's control over metal can be said to be handy, like an arm and a finger. Originally, Magneto was going to pierce Claude's head like Angel, but Brian had not yet obtained Claude's ability, and he would definitely not sit idly by and watch Magneto pierce Claude's head. So, when Magneto's coin was about to hit Claude's head, Brian used psychokinesis caught Claude. That's why Claude's head was intact, but his heart was pierced. After killing Claude, Magneto was stunned for a moment. Then he controlled the coin with his right hand again and attacked Sabretooth Victor next to Claude. Roar. Sabretooth Victor roared. He blocked Magneto's coin with his claws. However, just as Sabretooth Victor was about to rush towards Magneto, a steel nail on the ground quickly floated up. Then, in Sabretooth Victor's astonished eyes, it instantly pierced Sabretooth Victor's head. Bang! The brain was pierced, and Sabretooth Victor collapsed to the ground. His consciousness instantly fell into darkness. Victor. Seeing Victor's brain being pierced, he collapsed to the ground. Wolverine Logan, who had always depended on Sabretooth Victor, roared in anger. Magneto looked at Wolverine Logan strangely, with a puzzled look on his face. He didn't know that the Sabretooth he had knocked down was Wolverine Logan's half-brother. Magneto ignored the angry Wolverine Logan and moved his right hand slightly, and the coin that had turned blood red instantly flew to Bloody Kate. Seeing the mutants on his side being killed one by one, Bloody Kate had been scared and hid behind Cyclops Scott. "Scott, protect me." Blood-Eye Kate panicked and gave Cyclops Scott an order. After hearing Blood-Eye Kate's order, Cyclops Scott immediately released a laser and hit the coin directly. Magneto's coin was knocked out. It flew directly back into Magneto's hand. The laser that can penetrate steel cannot destroy Magneto's coin. Magneto frowned and glanced at Cyclops Scott, then stopped his attack. In just a moment, Magneto easily killed 3 members of the Hellfire Club. Even if it weren't for Cyclops Scott, he could easily kill Blood-Eye Kate. With just one coin, Magneto can instantly kill everyone in the Hellfire Club except the Red Devil. This is the face of Magneto, who belongs to the scene. As a level 4 mutant, the power displayed by Magneto is simply unmatched by these members of the Hellfire Club. When Magneto easily killed Angel, Mutant Claude, Sabretooth Victor. In the Hellfire Club, only Red Devil, Blood-Eye Kate, and Ghost Polly were left standing. However, Ghost Polly was about to give up. Under Professor X's mental shock, Ghost Polly's mental consciousness became increasingly scattered. It was only a matter of time before Ghost Polly died. "Scott, kill Magneto." Seeing that Magneto's attack had no effect, Blood-Eye Kate gave Cyclops Scott another order. Boom. Cyclops Scott, under Blood-Eye Kate's order, released a huge amount of lasers. Facing the attack of the laser, Magneto raised his hand casually. A nuclear submarine wreckage as tall as a person in the distance instantly hit Cyclops Scott. Scott groaned after being hit hard on the back of his head and fainted directly. The laser shot at Magneto also disappeared instantly. Magneto, seeing Magneto easily kill the trash of Hellfire Club in an instant, Beast Hank couldn't help but roared excitedly. Although there were not many people left standing on the X-Men side. But after all, there were more people than the Hellfire Club. Sure enough, he is a scene man, and he is a face as soon as he makes a move. Brian looked at Magneto standing proudly on the battlefield and looked at Magneto with new eyes. Although he is only a level 4 mutant now, but the combat effectiveness shown by Magneto is comparable to that of a level 5 mutant. His understanding and application of his mutant ability exceeds 99% of mutants. It is no wonder that Magneto can become one of the leaders of mutant in the future. Powerful mutant ability and top combat power are the prerequisites for Magneto to become the leader of mutant. However, Brian glanced at the nuclear power room. This mutant battle, at most, lasted only an hour, counting the time the X-Men spent on the road, and the time to find the nuclear submarine. Only 5 hours have passed. There is still an hour before Black Emperor Shao absorbs the energy of the nuclear power room. This battle can't end so quickly. Brian glanced in the direction of the X-Men. At this moment, it seems that there are only 2 members of the Hellfire Club left, which makes the X-Men relax. Beast Hank began to walk to Shockwave Alex. After checking Shockwave Alex's injuries, Beast Hank breathed a sigh of relief. Alex is still alive, Beast Hank said to Professor X, then took out the healing potion he developed from the pocket of X's uniform and injected it into Shockwave Alex's body. As the healing potion was injected, Shockwave Alex's body glowed with red light. Then his injuries recovered at a speed visible to the naked eye. In the blink of an eye, Shockwave Alex recovered as before. Hank, is the battle over? Shockwave Alex slowly opened his eyes, with some confusion in his eyes. The battle is not over yet, but it will be soon. Looking at Shockwave Alex, who had become lively again, Beast Hank patted his shoulder, pulled him up, and then briefly explained the current situation. When he heard that Magneto had instantly killed most of the Hellfire Club members, Shockwave Alex was shocked. Beast Hank did not hesitate. He came to the seriously injured Siren again. Then he injected a healing potion into the Siren's body. The Siren also recovered. Thanks, Hank. The Siren thanked Beast Hank with a grateful face. Beast Hank looked at the Siren with a smile on his face, and then said earnestly, "Don't get hurt again. I only have 2 healing potions left." In fact, just as Beast Hank said, he only made 5 healing potions. He used 1. Shockwave Alex used 1. The Siren used 1. Now he only has 2 healing potions left. And these 2 healing potions, Beast Hank plans to leave for Professor X and Magneto. After all, after fighting with the members of the Hellfire Club, they still have to fight a life-and-death battle with the world's strongest mutant, Black Emperor Shao. Don't worry, Hank. I won't get hurt again. The Siren nodded confidently. After this battle, he felt that his ability had become stronger. He felt that he could emit super infrasound that could kill people. Beast Hank patted Siren's shoulder and then walked in front of Cyclops Scott. After waking up Cyclops Scott, all X-Men were revived with full health. You have already lost. Surrender, Red Devil. Magneto looked at the Red Devil opposite calmly and said in a deep voice, "Really?" The Red Devil looked at Magneto without comment, then grabbed Blood-Eye Kate and disappeared on the deserted island. Escaped. Magneto frowned slightly, then opened his right hand, and the nuclear power room in front of him was instantly pulled in front of him. Looking at the nuclear power room in front of him, Magneto couldn't hide his excitement. He was finally going to stand in front of Black Emperor Shao. He was going to kill Black Emperor Shao with the coin in his hand. Just as Magneto was about to destroy the nuclear power room in front of him and pull Black Emperor Shao out of it, tearful air sounds quickly rang in the ears of all X-Men. In the Gulf of Cuba, Bloody Kate was on the Soviet warship. In front of her was General Alexei, the supreme commander of the Soviet warship, and General James, the supreme commander of the America aircraft carrier formation. At this moment, Bloody Kate was giving orders to the 2. Bomb that island flat. Under Bloody Kate's ability, the 2 generals quickly gave the order to fire missiles. For a moment, countless missiles were released from the warship and flew towards the island. Red Devil, are you really sure that you can kill the X-Men like this? And who just gave us the order? After giving the order, Bloody Kate looked at the only veteran of the Hellfire Club, Red Devil, with some trepidation. In response to Bloody Kate's inquiry, Red Devil Song looked at her coldly. Blood-Eye Kate, just follow the orders. Don't ask questions that you shouldn't ask. Seeing the indifferent Red Devil, Blood-Eye Kate closed her mouth instantly. However, she was in a state of turmoil at the moment. Because, just now, Blood-Eye Kate and Red Devil heard an order that only the two of them could hear. It was also under this order that Red Devil brought Blood-Eye Kate to the Soviet warship and let Blood-Eye Kate control Alexei and James. Blood-Eye Kate didn't know who was issuing the order. Red Devil believed in the order just now. Obviously, there is a mysterious mutant hidden behind the Hellfire Club. The smart Blood-Eye Kate didn't dare to ask more questions. She even had a feeling that the decisive battle between the Hellfire Club and the X-Men was under the control of the mysterious mutant. Blood-Eye Kate only felt that the water of the Hellfire Club was deeper than she thought. Black Emperor Shao was only the leader of the Hellfire Club on the surface. In fact, in secret, Black Emperor Shao is probably just a puppet. Just when Blood-Eye Kate was suspicious and thinking wildly. On the island, the X-Men looked at the dense missiles in the sky and changed color. Only Magneto remained calm. Facing the dense missiles, he just stretched out his right hand. The missiles that were originally flying towards the island all stopped in midair. Just when the X-Men members breathed a sigh of relief, Magneto suddenly used ability to turn the missiles around and aimed at the warships in the Cuban waters. Eric, what are you doing? Professor X, who was focusing on fighting Ghost Polly's mental protection, suddenly changed his face after seeing Magneto's actions. He had realized what Magneto was going to do. You know, Professor X, I just want to solve the Hellfire Club's mutant once and for all. After Magneto finished speaking, missiles began to accelerate towards the warships.
If you're enjoying the story so far and want to hear the next parts, don't forget to like the video. It really helps the channel grow. And if you'd like me to continue the series, drop a comment below letting me know. Your feedback and support keep these audiobooks going strong. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next one.